Hello everyone, and welcome to the longly anticipated, highly awaited, and slightly belated full ASMR Let's Play of all of the bosses in From Software's masterpiece, Bloodborne. So, for those of you who haven't seen my Dark Souls 2 video of the similar style, what I did was, while playing through the game, I saved every winning victory against each boss, and now I'm going to be showing you that while I provide a commentary. So, I'm going to be talking a bit about the lore, the story, my own personal experience, a review, maybe some strategies, just a bunch of different stuff like that, all Bloodborne related. But this is not a perfect strategy guide, so if you're looking for that, I would consult elsewhere. So, this lovely gentleman here with wax pancakes on his face, he's going to give us a contract, which will allow us to create our character and their backstory as we enter the town of Yharnam. So, I'm just going to go ahead and get my character created right now. If you want to skip directly to all the boss fights, you can go to this time in the video. But for now, I'm just going to ramble a bit, give my overall thoughts on the game. This is sort of the mini review section. So, this video, I will provide you timestamps for the main story bosses, the DLC, the Chalice bosses required to get to the Yharnam, the Queen, and the different endings of the game. So, overall, I think Bloodborne was quite a breath of fresh air coming off of Dark Souls 2. For all of its flaws and missteps, I still really liked Dark Souls 2. But I felt that the formula hadn't been done quite as well compared to Dark Souls 1, and it was really great to see things changed around just enough to feel interesting and new in Bloodborne. Which is interesting because at first I wasn't sure if I was going to like the game. Looking back, it does have a very strong opening, but I felt it was a little punishing, even if I was a quote, experienced player with the series. What I think this has to do with one of the biggest changes is that there are no shields in this game. There's like one from the DLC that's sort of decent, and there's one in the main game that's essentially a joke. So you can't crouch behind shields, you have to be really good at dodging or parrying. Initially, when I started to play this game, I picked the blunderbuss as my weapon, and I think that was what made it challenging for me because I could never get the parry timing down with that, and so I restarted. That's what you're going to see here, and I switched to using the pistol instead, and I think that was a much more streamlined and enjoyable experience. So that would be my main thing, is that it can be quite the sort of mental shift for you to focus on that. I mean, I already was sort of trying to discard away with using big, heavy tower shields in the original Dark Souls and Dark Souls 2, but still, it is kind of a switch to just not even have that option and have the game be centered around that. Story and environment-wise, I thought it was a lot more tighter and well done than Dark Souls 2. It was a very streamlined and simple story, even if there are layers upon layers that I still don't understand in the backstory and the way the world came to be. But I felt that this story just was more interestingly created than Dark Souls 2, which felt more like a retelling of Dark Souls 1, and I know that is kind of the theme and the style I go for, but it was nice to see something new. And I love all of the environments in this game, and how it starts off as this very Victorian era steampunk style game, and then it slowly starts undergoing a metamorphosis from all of these beast-type things into these alien monstrosities from beyond the farthest dreams and concoctions of H.P. Lovecraft or something like that, and all these Cthulhu monsters. It was so well done the way this shift occurred throughout the game, and I think that was my favorite element of it. I don't know if I really have too many more specific review thoughts. I mean, I'm sure you'll get to hear all of that in the individual bosses when we get there. But yeah, this is a fantastic game. I'm so glad I finally got around to playing it. I don't know what took me so long. I was probably just scared of the unrelenting difficulty. I'd like to give a special shout out to all of the other YouTube channels that, were influential in helping me sort of envision this video. So, the Democracy, Dave Control, Vati Vidya, For the Gun, Fighting Cowboy, there's a bunch of great content creators out there with a lot of good Bloodborne videos and stuff. And so, it's all really, really useful in creating this. Yeah. And I think that's about all I have to say. I'm not going to be ranking these bosses in any way. I thought about doing that, but I'd probably just change my opinion in like 5 minutes and have to redo the whole video, so we're not going to bother with that. So the bosses are going to be in the relative order I encountered them, in the relative recommended order. Then there'll be the DLC bosses, which I feel are always best saved for last, since they are the cream crop of difficulty. And then the Chalice bosses. So for those of you who don't know, the Chalice dungeons are an optional segment where you can go sort of dungeon diving to fight new bosses and gain extra loot and ritual items. And if you progress through these dungeons and do a certain number, you get to fight Queen Yharnam, the Pthumerian Queen. And defeating her is what gets you the probably last trophy you'll get leading to your platinum. So that will all be near the end of the video. So again, timestamps will be in the description for those of you that wish to select specific parts. And I think with all that said and done, we'll just get right to the bosses. So let's just fast forward through this monstrosity of a character that I created. I always like to create really weird, interesting looking characters because, it makes getting killed over and over by all these monsters just more entertaining and hilarious. And yeah, let's get right down to it. Now that we have completed our contract, this lovely figure here will now begin our blood transfusion, with this acquiring the healing powers of the blood. Now, I'm not perfectly clear on the meaning of this intro cutscene. There are many different theories out there. But a popular one I've heard is that this next segment sort of represents the struggle to overcome the beast within. Many of the townsfolk in Yharnam have succumbed to the bloodlust, and they're no longer truly human. Many of them are beasts, or others, blood-crazed fiends and murderers. So perhaps this sequence here represents the beast within trying to tame us, but ultimately being defeated. And then the messengers appear and will allow us to become linked to the Hunter's dream, and thus be a servant for Gehrman, the first hunter. Or something like that. The brilliance of the From Software games like Dark Souls and Bloodborne is that there are many different and unique theories and ideas about what things could truly represent. But I like the idea of this representing an internal struggle. And I think it is also solidified by this line, which is spoken by the doll who we will encounter. So at the beginning of the game, you're going to awake in Yosefka's clinic, and I'll give a little pro tip, and that is to leave down a note with some kind of funny or witty line, because every time one of your notes gets rated as fine, you get your health back. And so what I did was I left a note right on this spot of the door saying, a time for nightmares. And the amount of times that I got health during boss fights was really great. So, from this we are told to seek the pale blood, and our adventures will lead us to the healing church. Now, I did not succeed my first time fighting the Cleric Beast, but I did want to show his intro because it is pretty cool. You're just walking along this bridge, enjoying the view, and everything's fine, heading towards the church, when all of a sudden this lovely monstrosity appears. So, after I unfortunately fell victim to the Cleric Beast, it was time to return for some sweet, sweet vengeance. So, the Cleric Beast is the first boss that most players will probably come across, but he is completely optional. The actual first boss we will get to later. Now, in terms of first bosses, I find that the Cleric Beast is a little bit on the challenging side, and it's for a few mechanical reasons in the fight. I'm not the biggest fan of how you lock onto the center of the body. I liked in Dark Souls 2 when you could lock onto the legs of taller bosses, and then it made it easier to strafe around. But then again, these games are about providing a challenge, so I guess I can't be too annoyed at that. The main goal of your fight should be to, as Democracy put it, stick to that booty. You want to stick to the back, strafe around, so that you dodge the attacks. The Cleric Beast has a sort of backhanded swipe that he likes to do if you're behind him. So if you can just repeatedly dodge that and attack, you should be in the clear. The only thing I find a little challenging is that this bridge you fight on, it's a bit of a narrow area, and so I find in times like that it was a little difficult to get around, because he would pin himself up against a wall. But I wouldn't say that I hate this fight, it's just not my favorite in the game. It definitely punishes the player for not properly adapting to the style. It's also a bit more of an endurance fight, because at this point in the game you only have very low damage weapons, and it teaches you to realize that Bloodborne is not a game where you carry around giant massive weapons and hit very hard. It's about quick strikes and quick movement. You have to dodge much more ferociously, as I soon learned. It also really helps if you're better at parrying, as then you'll be able to get many more effective strikes. There's not too much of a story for the Cleric Beast, but I know that the long-standing theory until the DLC was that it was Laurence, the first hunter of the church. However, it was only partially true, as we will see Laurence, the first vicar, later in the Hunter's Nightmare. This is some random character as a Cleric Beast. Maybe it's Ludwig. I'm not entirely sure. get hit. And I think the last main pointer I have is to remember to heal, because the healing is a lot faster in this game. Everything is a lot more quickly paced. As long as you persevere and dodge fast, the Cleric Beast shouldn't be too difficult of a fight. Just try to remember to stick to dead booty. And now that we have defeated the Cleric Beast, you can push on forward to the next boss, Father Gascoigne. The next fight, and the first mandatory boss, is Father Gascoigne, and as a intro boss, he is quite the challenge. This is a boss that will force you to learn Bloodborne's unique mechanics and its stylistic difference from the other Dark Souls games. Father Gascoigne was a hunter for the church, but on this night of the hunt, he has gone a little bit too crazy and caught up in his bloodlust. You will be able to find after the fight that this is due to him accidentally killing his wife. Now, earlier, before you get to this fight, it is possible to come across his daughter, who will give you a music box. You'll want to use that for this fight. I, however, completely forgot about it. So, in a way, this video will be a list of ways not to fight Gascoigne. For one, make sure you parry properly. Get good at parrying the humanoid-sized hunters, because it makes everything a lot easier. Also, Bloodborne is different from other Dark Souls games because when you are down after being knocked back, if you quickly roll, you're actually able to get back up faster. You can also still be damaged while you're on the ground, so don't just sit around waiting for your character to get back up. Spam that circle button. Now, with the music box, you'll want to wait until Gascoigne enters his final form, because it will stun him for a few seconds, allowing you to get a few hits. With Gascoigne, you have to be up close and aggressive, and don't allow him to ever get a moment to get a shot on you. Stick close to him and attack fast. Gascoigne is probably one of my favorite bosses in the game because he has a very interesting and tragic story. I wouldn't say he's an unfair fight, he's very well balanced. Perhaps once you come back in New Game Plus, he may be a little bit easier with your newfound experience, but as an intro boss, he is quite challenging. Another important thing you may have noticed there is I did get a successful parry, but even if you get stunned by being hit, you're able to quickly tap circle and get back in faster to get that riposte. So this is where it would be best for you to use the music box, as this gives you a few seconds to attack him. Also, I believe in this form that Gascoigne is more weak to fire since he's a beast, so be sure to make good use of those Molotov cocktails. The main attack that he has is many quick hits followed by a kick, and that kick can be a little devious because you can usually direct it to the side, which you may have been dodging for. So the trick is to stay out of the way of his path of destruction and wait for that final kick afterwards to get in. If you stay too far back, it gives him too much of an opportunity to use jump attacks, so you've really got to get in close. It's a strategy you'll be seeing with many other bosses. After the fight is over, don't forget to check on one of the buildings up by the gate for the red jewel brooch. That belonged to Gascoigne's wife, and is This fight is optional if you would rather use your blood echoes to purchase a badge from the shopkeeper messages in the Hunter's Dream. However, if you want a true challenge, this good old Skin Flaps here is the next foe you will fight. Now, I did summon Alfred for help because I was a little frustrated with the number of solo attempts this boss took me, but I did try to minimize the number of NPC summons that I used, and later on I did defeat this monster in the Chalice dungeons solo, so I was capable of doing it. Don't hate on me too much. Anyway, the blood-starved beast resides at the bottom of the old Yharnam area, which has been sealed off due to the beast infection. It was sort of a ground zero for the beast scourge. Blood-starved beast can be easily trivialized if you are good at parrying. However, at this point I still hadn't properly gotten into the Parry King God mode. However, most of his attacks can be simple to dodge. I find what makes this fight challenging is in the last phase, where he sort of goes a little overboard with the poison effect. You'll see that he starts leaking poison everywhere, and you can get poisoned fast, and the time it takes you to pop an antidote might result in you getting grabbed by that jump attack. There isn't too much of a story for this blood-starved beast, but I do think it's interesting that despite the fact that he's in a town of corpses, monsters, and beasts and blood, he's still starved, so it really goes to illustrate and add an effect of how crazed this monster must be. So, again, if you are having trouble with this fight, use fire paper, use Molotovs, practice the parry timing, and always have antidotes with you. Remember to keep your distance and allow your poison meter to go down, and with that you should be able to conquer this blood-starved beast. This will give you access to the Chalice dungeons, and it will also allow you to enter the top of the tower in the Healing Church workshop. So, another optional boss fight is the Witches of Hemwick. Yes, I embarrassingly did die once on this fight, and that's because I got grabbed by this sort of sneak attack grab move that I didn't know they could do. It sort of took me by surprise. So, yes, I swear I'm good at this game. I swear I am. So, this fight is probably the worst fight in the game, as it's more of a game of hide and seek than an actual boss fight. Basically, that creature you just saw is one of the witches, and it hides around, and you go find it and attack it. I didn't realize that you could do a backstab move on it. It probably would have made this fight go a little bit faster. Instead, I just decided to beat on it with the Holy Blade. The other scythe creature you see walking around, they don't really seem to care about you unless you get close to them. And if you do actually come to this fight with 0 insight, they won't even spawn, which makes this fight even easier. So, all you really have to do is move fast so the scythe creatures don't attack you, and watch out for the few pitiful attacks that these witches have. After you kill the first one, a second one shows up, but they only have half a health bar, and that's when they can do this grab move where they quickly rush at you and it drains a lot of your health. So that was what got me the first time. There isn't really much lore-wise that I know of these witches, but basically what they're guarding is the rune workshop tool that allows you to equip Bloodborne such as additional health or stamina or getting bullets from successfully doing a parry. The witches are optional only if you go down the Hemwick Journal lane, which is to the left of the Grand Cathedral. But I like to do this fight before fighting Vicar Amelia because that fight is very difficult if you're not prepared for it. So I like to have leveled up and gotten all the bonuses I can that are possible before attempting that. I don't really have too much else to say about this fight. It's an interesting concept that I know From Software likes to do, but I feel that this type of fight wasn't necessarily executed the best. I think it was sort of done better in another Souls game like the Deacons of the Deep in Dark Souls 3. So you see here that I defeat this one witch, and then this other one shows up, and that's the true one, I guess, as now its health bar has appeared. And again, you just keep walking around, and those scythe guys don't even seem to care. So, yeah, not really much to it. Just watch out for that blue energy blast, as that will paralyze you, and that's where you can get grabbed. Just stay mobile. And right here I was sort of getting a little paranoid that I'd get all those scythe guys to gang up on me. But again, that's all it takes. You also get a bloodshot eyeball, which is ritual material used for one of the chalices, so it's also important as well. So, the next optional boss you can do before fighting Vicar Amelia is Darkbeast Paarl. Now this boss is found in either the secret area, Hypogean Jail, or the uncovered area, the Blood Moon. The name's totally escaping me. Oh, Yharnam, the Unseen Village. Sorry, momentary lapse of reason. So, this point is where I came to the secret area first. If you show up at this time, you may be a little low level, but the fight is challenging. If you show up when you're in Yharnam, then the fight might be a little too easy for you. So, the way to get to this fight is, after you defeat the blood-starved beast, you'll see these enemies around called Snatchers. They carry a big sack, and you let yourself get killed by one of them, and they'll take you to this jail. And if you progress through the jail, you'll come across Darkbeast Paarl. He's an okay boss fight. I do think his design is pretty cool, but the only annoying thing I found, at least for my playstyle, is that he can be difficult to hit, since you can only really get the legs, and locking on can be very deadly if you get stuck under him. Similar to locking on is not a good idea when you fight Sith in Dark Souls 1. The trick mainly is to make sure you have high enough damage to sort of knock out his electrical attacks. If you're able to hit him hard enough when he's buffing his electricity, you'll knock him down. And then if you keep doing enough damage, you'll keep knocking him down. And a good elemental effect like fire is always important. Main thing is you have to stay very fast, as I've been constantly saying, because this boss, of course, has the nickname of the Camera Beast, as with his erratic behavior, it's very difficult to get a proper hit on if he keeps moving. But again, beat on him very hard with a high damage weapon, and you'll keep him down and keep him from being buffed with the electricity. is out of the way, you should be now fully powered up and ready to die at the hands of the next mandatory main story boss, Vicar Amelia. Not Vicar, it's Vicar. I'm not sure what that means though, if that's some sort of title, because I didn't do my research properly before this video. Professional content creator, everyone. So, I forgot about using the silencing blank to stop the co-op bell from going, so you may see the co-op message appear throughout this fight, so sorry for that. But I wanted to show my first fight, as that's the authentic way we do it for these types of videos. So what I think is interesting is you can hear Amelia uttering this little prayer, and later on, I believe you come across her again in the Hunter's Nightmare. It's right after you defeat Ludwig, and before you take the elevator ascending to the research hall. I absolutely love this cutscene. It's such a horrific, atmospheric introduction, and it's just so well shot. It's really interesting, I think, to say that I like the cinematography in a video game, but this is some very brutal and scary cinematography. I believe that the idea is that Amelia was barely clinging on to the last remnants of her human self, and this is where she sort of goes literally full-on beast mode. But it's a nice detail that throughout the fight she's still clutching that pendant, and that's a lovely image right there. So, with Amelia, again, the golden rule applies. Stick to that booty, because if you don't, you get sideswiped like that. The reason I find Amelia a little more challenging than other bosses that require that rule is that she has a great deal of attacks that are meant to circumvent you from just simply staying behind. So you have to skillfully dodge and find good opportunities to get in. And don't allow yourself to become locked into a combo. Whatever you do, you have to keep dodging and keep rolling. Another important thing to note is that Amelia has the ability to heal. So what you should do is properly explore the area before, because you can find an item called a numbing mist, which prevents health regeneration. I didn't do it in this fight, I completely forgot about it, but on subsequent fights it is quite hilarious to see her get mad at the fact that she can't heal. If she does ever attempt to heal, you just have to simply get in there and be aggressive. I don't know if there are any attacks that Amelia has that can be parried. I didn't really attempt it during this fight, but it is possible to get a few strikes on her head, and this will weaken her so that you can do some critical damage. So anytime you have the opportunity to get a good headshot, take that. Right here is her healing. And again, charge attacks are useful, but it might be best to go for the quick strikes as it is for the rest of the game. I don't really know much else about the lore of Amelia, but we do know that she was guarding the altar, which I believe has Laurence's skull, as it does in the Hunter's Nightmare. And by touching the skull, it will give you the password, which allows you to get into the Forbidden Woods. Because at this point, you just have some creepy guy asking for the password, which you don't know. So, I got a little frustrated there that she pretty much healed everything I took away. But again, this is a game that's all about perseverance. It's probably going to be a long fight if you don't know what you're doing and allow her to get a lot of healing in. Now I believe at this point I had a elemental effect already equipped on my weapon, which is why I couldn't use fire paper. And I found out later that adding fire damage via a bloodstone is nice, but I don't think it necessarily adds as much as if you use like fire paper or bolt paper. I'm not sure, I haven't checked the exact details or stats on that yet. You also really have to watch out for grab attacks, as they will royally damage you. And usually I find that you end up getting caught in the next combo. So once again she healed, but I believe this time I did a more heavy strike. See, that weakened her there, and if I did her head there, I probably could have gotten a proper critical attack on. And once again I got grabbed. I did say this was the first time I fought the boss, not that it was the best time, nor is this a perfect strategy guide of any sorts. I felt that using two-handed weaponry was overall more effective because it did more damage, which allowed me to get those critical hits in. If you are having trouble with Amelia, you could always co-op with someone. I do really like the way that co-op works in Bloodborne, because it's perfectly set up so that you can have a friend join you if you do the password matching with the bells. And I also like that for co-op you don't have to find someone's sign specifically on the ground, you just have to have the bells activated. The only thing that is a little not like my favorite element of it is I find that it can be a little unbalanced at times, and that is that there are some bosses where I feel that one person is it's too difficult for them, and for two people it's too easy just for one to aggro while the other does all the attacks. So you get this gold pendant from Amelia, and if you crush it, it gives you a bloodstone gem. I'm not sure off the top of my head which one you get. So after you beat Amelia, don't forget to touch this skull. I know there's a few people that defeat her and then are completely oblivious of what they do next, and then they just decide to quit the game. So this skull, again, I believe it's Laurence, brings you into a memory of him and his last conversation with Master Willem. So this is taking place at the university or college lecture building of Bergenworth, where Willem and Laurence sought ways to unlock higher planes of being and power and understanding of the Great Ones beyond the mind of humanity. They were divided on their ways on how to approach this. Laurence believed in the power of blood, where Willem believed in the power of insight and eyes. So, in this memory, we see Laurence leaving, Master Willem feeling betrayed. Willem went on to use the power of insight at Bergenworth, which is where we'll be heading next. And Laurence went on to found the Healing Church. The next mandatory boss in the story progression is the Shadows of Yharnam, also basically the ring wraiths from Lord of the Rings. I like the design, even if it is pretty much that. There's enough variation with the fire and the candles and the swords and snakes, but I like to refer to them as the ring wraiths. So you'll progress through the Forbidden Woods and then come across these guys near the end. Make sure you carefully explore the snake-infested woods, because there are two shortcuts that if you don't unlock, it's going to be quite the long journey in the highly likely event of death. So for this fight there are 3 shadows, and each of them has a different skill set. You've got this one that has a mace and will usually like to use pyromancy attacks from a distance. You've got one that mainly just uses a sword, and another that is sort of a bit of a medium combination of a sword and fire. So as you progress through them, they'll get get stronger in certain ways, such as them spawning snakes and having attacks that reach a lot farther. So I find the best way, as with most gank-style bosses, is to focus on one at a time, if possible. And then you can get one of them down fast. One thing you can also do, you won't have it in your inventory at this time, I believe, and that's the Shaman Boneblade, which makes enemies attack each other. I did it once on New Game Plus, and it was pretty funny to see the shadows turn on each other so quickly. Again, the best thing I found is to try and see if you can get attacks on the ranged one, as he'll be the one sort of standing back and wrecking you from afar. This arena is also pretty nice, as it makes good use of crowd control features, such as all of the tombstones lying around. Make sure you use those to keep yourself safe from the ranged attacks. I don't really have many lore theories or ideas about these shadows. I just know they're somehow related to Yharnam, perhaps Queen Yharnam, and the Pthumerians, the ancient race that rests below the city. That attack right there is the main one you have to watch for. Basically, this shadow, he summons out giant snakes from the ground, and I don't know exactly how you do it, but it just seemed like it was impossible for me to dodge it anytime he did, and he kept on trying to spam this attack on me. I got pretty annoyed. So maybe just stick close to him and then he won't use it. It seems even if you interrupt him, he'll still be able to get that attack off, and again, I don't know how you dodge it. But that's fine, once you get him down to one, as long as you can avoid that snake attack, he's not too difficult, and you'll fight these shadows as regular enemies near the very end at Mergo's Loft. Again, good crowd control, and focus on one at a time. And with that, you'll be able to progress forward to Bergenworth. Okay, so strap yourselves in, folks, because this is going to be a bit of a long fight. So we've made it through Bergenworth, and we arrive up on this sort of balcony here, and this is Master Willem. And I think he's just so consumed by insight that all he can do is just point at the moon and tell you to go that way. So you can kill him and get a rune out of it. However, for some reason, I just totally failed at hitting him properly with that strong attack. So, don't do that. Actually hit him properly. I believe it's the eye rune, if I recall correctly. Well, we'll find out in a second. Yes, it is. Good. Now, if you do co-op, I used NPC summons for this fight. They won't be able to get through until you jump down, so take that leap of faith into the lake. This will bring us to Rom, the Vacuous Spider. Now this fight can be pretty challenging depending on how well you get lucky with the sort of randomness of his little spider minions. I wouldn't recommend using NPCs for this fight, because usually they just rush in and get themselves killed right away, and now you're left with a more difficult fight, as you will soon see here. So watch out for that bit of the jump scare with all the spiders. So in this first phase, what I would recommend doing is killing all of the individual spiders first. You can't really damage them for their head. You have to hit them to the side or their back, and then they're really weak. Because Rom, she can't fight back right now in this phase, but in later phases she will. So as you can see there, I'm doing almost no damage, and their jump attack hits really hard. So be sure to run around nicely. I would essentially use this video as a sort of not what to do when fighting Rom. For example, don't attack the head. It's actually not a weak point. You want to hit this potato in the sides. Kill all the spiders individually, because running in with all of these spiders, eventually you could maybe potentially face up to 20 or 30 of them at once, and that's not going to be fun when Rom actually starts fighting back. So, the lore and story, from what I can recall, is that Rom is an attempt to create or engineer a Great One by the Scholars of Bergenworth. There is a note which you can find near the Healing Church, and I believe it says something on the lines of that the Bergenworth spider hides a manner of all rituals. So I think it's that Rom is somehow using her power to hide the blood moon and hide sort of the true identity of all of this stuff going on from the residents of the town. Maybe, because after you defeat Rom, you'll see that the blood moon goes into full force and you have to fight the One Reborn. But we'll get to that later. So, again, make sure you hit the backside of the spiders. But, again, this is probably not the best strategy, because you'll see here I went and, progressed the fight all the way into the third phase. And now we have to deal with all these spiders. And I'm pretty sure any second now, both of my NPCs are going to get themselves killed. Now, despite the hecticness of it, the good news is that Rom really only has about 2 or 3 attacks. If you just sort of hang around close, she sort of just flops around. That's all she can do, so just stay back from that. Then she has the one attack where she sort of raises herself up and then shoots magic missiles. It's really the one to watch for. Then there's the third attack, which is just more of an AoE. So just make sure you're running and you'll be able to dodge all of these. And don't stop whatever you do. Because if you're co-oping with someone, you'll probably be low enough health that you'll get one shot. Oh, I forgot there's that other AoE. But, that's not really too much of a thing to worry about, so long as you make sure to keep your distance. Not like I did. It's funny, going back to all of this and looking at all the other fights I've had and kind of how almost embarrassed I am to put this out, but for the sake of accuracy, we are going to be showing the first fight and the first win. I think the other issue I had is I really was trying to main this Ludwig's Holy Blade, but it probably wasn't best to be using it in two-handed mode. I was thinking about doing this because I knew I wouldn't be using a gun to parry or anything like that, but honestly it kind of just slows your attacks down, and sometimes you end up missing with the large swings, so probably better to go single-handed. My other issue was just that I wasn't trying to kill these spiders individually. I got a little greedy, started running in, and then that means that you are more likely to get hit and trapped. So, health is always a concern to watch for. Despite the randomness and sporadicness of this fight, I don't think it's too difficult if you know what you're doing and you properly orient yourself. And I wouldn't say it's a bad fight as well. I do enjoy it. It's more middle of the pack for me. I know some people, really hate it, but I've had some fun co-oping on it with people. It's always nice to help out those who are struggling. One interesting thing to keep an eye for, because I didn't really realize it during this fight, but I think in the background you can see what looks like an infant Great One just sort of hanging out on the edge, right over there to the right side of the screen. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be there. Almost every time I remember to go and look at that, it's not when I'm fighting this fight. But it could tie in with this sort of whole Unborn type theme that's going to be sort of popping up with Mergo and all that. And the funny thing is when we get to all those bosses, I still don't even know really what was going on for the last third of this game. I was just running around fighting monsters that, according to honest trailers, looked like all the animals in the zoo got turned inside out and then stapled together. And yes, unfortunately, we're still here. This was quite an endurance test, and I'm so stupid of the way I did this. Like, I cannot stress enough, don't follow this as a guide as what not to do. You see, I even almost ran out of health in this part, because again, getting greedy is probably not the best thing to do. You gotta take it nice and careful and kill all the individual spiders. Don't use NPC summons if you're gonna get help. Get help in the form of actual players. That was the other thing. I realized you could sort of get hit by the spiders afterwards, so I kind of almost died from that. But with that slog of an endurance fest finally over, we progress to the next stage of the game. So look around, and you should see there's the infant over to the right side, and there is Queen Yharnam. So we're going to go over to have a nice, lovely chat with her. And then from here we get a cutscene which will lead us into the final long stretch of the game. From here, the town is going to enter the Blood Moon phase. And you're going to be faced with a lot of really annoying areas, like Yahargul, the Unseen Village, because there's a bunch of respawning enemies in there that won't stop appearing until you kill the Bellringers. But more on that at the next boss. So, now that we have made it through Yahargul, the next primary boss in the story is the One Reborn. This is probably the grossest boss in the game. It's quite a sight to behold, as we will soon see. There's not too much that I know about the story of the One Reborn, but from my understanding, I believe that this is a result of the church experiments, the reason why they've been kidnapping so many people. Because we have all the snatchers running around town, and they're kidnapping people. You can get kidnapped by them and end up here a lot earlier than you should. So, they kidnap people, they bring them all to here, and from the Blood Moon and the darkest regions of the cosmos, we get this thing that looks like a bunch of bodies piled together. So, that would be my assumption. But I'm not entirely sure. What I do know is that it's nasty, and we're gonna have to kill it. And oh, what great fun that will be. This is a middle-of-the-range boss fight for me. It's not too amazing, but I do like that it's a nice reference stylistically to the Tower Knight from Demon's Souls. And there's a face only a mother can love. Now, this next bit sort of annoyed me, because you can see I didn't even have time to react, and he already hit me for half my health right off the bat. Like, what are you doing? One Reborn, that is not fair. So, the first thing you're going to want to do is get up to the next level. Just go really fast, and you shouldn't get hit. As long as you move quickly through here and make quick work of all of the bell-ringing bitches, you shouldn't have too much of a problem. Unlike me, who I sort of got stuck, as you can see. Don't let that happen to you. Again, they're not really tough, and they're more concerned with providing spells to buff the One Reborn and keep it alive. So that's why it's important to get rid of them. And also, don't forget to grab your bullets. So, while it is stylistically similar to the Tower Knight, I don't think it captures the epic grand scale of that fight nearly as much, but that's okay. The grossness and the just overall nastiness of this boss, I think, is enough to make it interesting. So, now that you've slayed all these Bell Maidens, this guy, he won't get buffed or healed in any way, and you can go down and fight the actual thing. So, most of his attacks are just AoEs or stomp attacks, and then he also has this sort of raining men attack. Watch out for that, because it can really mess you up. It's sort of unexpected. His legs can sort of be a little weird with their hitboxes, and I find sometimes if he stamps on you, it'll damage you, but you won't really see it registered as a hit. But the main thing is just really get onto his side and hit him, and try and do enough damage that you'll knock him down. If you do get a chance to get in there and attack the head, it'll do a lot of damage to him. Just watch out for that leg stomp and the raining man attack. I saw a really great video where somebody used the beast claws and beast blood pellets, and they were able to kill them like from straight to finish in about 20 seconds. I haven't had a chance to try that strategy yet, but I could see it working, because as it is, the double two-handed Ludwig's blade probably wasn't the best choice for a fight like this. So right there, I've knocked him down, and now you can get in and do massive damage. I think you might be able to get a critical on him if you do enough. I'm not sure. I don't think I was able to do it in this fight. Another attack you gotta watch out for is the acid vomit attack. He sort of spews a bunch of acid around him. It almost takes up the sort of entire floor of this area. So be sure to watch out for that, because it'll really mess you up. Again, as long as you don't get too greedy, just watch yourself. It's not really that difficult of a fight. I don't think I've ever died properly to him. I may have died, like, if I was co-oping with someone and I was just being greedy. Just focus. It's not too bad at this stage in the game. I'm sure there's been worse challenges. Now, I think what had happened is I had knocked him down there, but I was on his backside and not his head side. I don't think I have too much else to say. Again, there's not much for story. Mechanically, it's not like it's a terrible fight. It's pretty good. It's a nice reference. And overall, it's sort of middle of the ground. Not really that difficult. Again, I enjoy this fight just for the pure creativity and disgustingness of it. He got a little creative with his attacks there, with that big sweep attack. So, again, this is sort of another one of the golden rules. Is just, stick to the side, stay in close, don't stay far away. They use big sweep attacks and a bunch of stuff like that. And really, at this point, the only reason it took so long is I just decided I would be cautious and not be too greedy, and that's the way you've got to do it. And with that, we've defeated the One Reborn. And now we are able to enter the Nightmare of Mensis. But before we progress to the final story area of the game, there are several optional areas that we should investigate. Okay, so the first optional area that we're going to talk about here is the Forsaken Castle Cainhurst. And the final boss of this area is the very challenging Martyr Logarius. So, the lore concept behind this is that there are sort of competing factions. There is the Vile Bloods who reside here in Castle Cainhurst, and they are the sworn enemy of the Church Executioners. You meet the Church Executioner earlier, and then he's on his quest to find and defeat the Evil Queen. So you can make your way here, but to first have audience with the Queen, you must defeat Martyr Logarius, who now rests on his throne, as he is sworn to defend her from all intruders. I didn't beat him my first time, but I wanted to show that intro because it's pretty cool. So, I'll get the first topic of this boss out of the way first. His first stage, he really likes to spam all of these magic spells, and he constantly moves. So really what I found you need to do is just stick to him like glue, get up nice and close, and don't let him use spells. And if you do, then he'll probably really wreck you up. That's how I died on my first several times in this fight. And if he does try to go for a scythe swing, make sure you parry him. So first off, a little description on how to get to this area. What you'll have to do is get into the back door of the clinic you woke up from at the beginning of the game. To do this, you will need to find a hidden route in the Forbidden Woods. Basically just hug the left wall constantly. You'll end up in this underground cavern with a bunch of poison in it. And from there you'll be able to get to the back entrance of the clinic, and on the bed you woke up there will be the Canehurst summons. Now what I didn't realize is when he's powering up you can actually get several hits on him and stun him and parry him, but I wanted to play it safe not to get totally wrecked by that AoE. That jump attack of his is very annoying. You basically have to roll like at the last second before he comes down, otherwise he'll be able to like perfectly lock onto you. Dark Souls 2 tracking for the win. But after you get the Canehurst summons, you're going to want to go back to the area of the Witches of Hemwick, the Hemwick Trial Lane, and this carriage will show up, and that will allow you to get to this area. So when he's in this buffed state right now, he's basically almost an entirely different boss. He's more focused on swinging with the scythe, but that does mean he's more susceptible to parrying. Now, he didn't do this one attack during this fight with me. He did it in others, but what he'll do is he'll slam his sword into the ground, and it'll start shooting a bunch of swords out of the air. He did that at the end of my first fight with him, and that pretty much was what was the game over for me. If he does this, you can actually shoot the sword, and that gets rid of it. So don't forget, shoot the sword. But I got lucky, and he didn't use that attack during this fight. Basically, since it's such a fast relentless fight, you just want to be up nice and close and properly parry and all that stuff. I really like the story of what occurs after you beat this fight is when you meet the Queen, you'll able to get unaddressed Canehurst summons, and you can give it to Alfred, and then he'll show up and he'll murder the Queen. It's a really great sequence. And then later on, when you defeat Ebrietas, you're able to offer the Queen's flesh to the altar, and then she'll be revived. There's not really too much to the story other than that, but it's a nice little hidden bit, and it's nice to have all of the FromSoft and PC characters and stories interwoven in carefully. That jump attack can be really annoying, but with persistence and playing it fast, that's what you gotta do. If Father Gascoigne was the intro fight to show you how you have to be up close, fast-paced, and relentless, then this is the one that really properly hammers in that. But with enough perseverance, you'll be able to best Martyr Logarius. He resides in this area because he knows that he cannot kill the Queen since she is immortal. So what he does is now stops anyone from trying to suffer the same fate, as he realizes it's the only solution. So don't forget to come over here, because that is the crown. When you wear the crown, you'll be able to have access to the hidden area where the Queen is. The next optional area we're going to talk about is the Nightmare Frontier. This area you can access by going through the bottom half of the lecture hall. You can either get to the lecture hall from the normal way of the Nightmare of Mensis, or by getting grabbed by one of the Amygdalas after you've been teleported into the Yarhargul entrance, and from here you'll fight a true Amygdala. Now, as for the pronunciation, I'm going to say Amygdala because it's also a part of the brain. I know that Patches, he says Amygdala, so maybe that's what it's supposed to be, but I'm going to say Amygdala, mainly because of this great theory that I saw online, and it was someone had pointed out that so the amygdala is the fear center of your brain, or controls inhibitions. I forget exactly what it is, but it's an organ in the brain. And what you've done is you've gone at this point inside a nightmare, and you're fighting an amygdala. So in a way, you've, entered your own mind to face your own fear. So I like that sort of touch to it. So Amygdala is a great boss fight. I love it so much because there's many different ways to approach this fight. The head is the weak point where you can do massive damage. You can hit the arms, the legs, and the tail, but it doesn't really do much damage. You see, I was trying to go for tail attacks because it's the safest, but it just is not really fruitful in the end. He's got a variety of attacks that are very interesting. There's a lot of variety. The main thing what you have to do is, I find, is bait the attacks and then get in close and attack the head. If he does that laser, that's not too difficult to dodge, and if you do enough damage, you can get in and do a critical. I find the toughest part is later on. He actually rips two of the arms off his back like this. So now he has extra reach. Like that's pretty awesome. But yeah, what you gotta do is just get nice big hard strikes into those bits. He's very punishing in this last phase though. Like that black hole attack can do a lot of damage. The Nightmare Frontier may be a bit of an annoying area with the poison-filled swamp that has to be in every From Software game, but I think it's worth it to fight this fight because it's just really intense. This feels so epic fighting one of these things finally. And the last pointer, I guess, is that if he does a jump attack, usually his head lands where his tail was. So if you can bait that, then you'll be in the perfect spot to get a head strike like that. And with that, you should conquer the Amygdala. This will give you a Chalice, so you can get into one of the Chalice dungeons later. That is why you would want to do this fight. Another optional area you can go to is the Upper Cathedral Ward. So this area, you'll first need to get a key from Yarhargul by doing some clever drop downs into this hidden caged area. And once you make it to the top of the Upper Cathedral Ward, you'll encounter the Celestial Emissary. This boss is along a similar style to bosses like the Royal Rat Vanguard, Deacons of the Deep, or sort of ROM, but it's not nearly on the level of difficulty as many bosses in the game. Honestly, I was sort of taking it a little less seriously by using the Hunter Blades from Eileen. So basically what you need to do is you'll find that one of these little Mr. Meeseeks will be hiding out in the back. That's the one. You'll see that damaging him actually damages the health bar. So after you damage him enough, he'll sort of go Super Saiyan and go into a giant mode. And that's the real boss fight, but even then, he's not too difficult. Honestly, I was just being very greedy, very silly, because you'll see I've already taken down over half his health. The little Mr. Meeseeks, they will respawn, but again, they're not too difficult to take out. The only thing you have to watch out for is getting totally ganked. There's not much to the story about the Celestial Emissary, but I believe the theory is that they are the choir, the highest members of the church, because it all talks about the choir hanging out here. And, as we can see, we've gone to the top, and there's a bunch of people up here that have been transformed into these alien monsters that I guess are representations of great ones. And it's a nice, easy fight. Ebrietas, on the other hand, is not an easy fight. I don't know how I beat her on my first try. So, what's important to remember is that after you defeat the Celestial Emissary, there is a window near the lantern that you can break. And going through there will eventually lead you down an elevator behind where Vicar Amelia was into this lovely creature, Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos. I think it's interesting that she's praying to this altar of despair that has something that looks very like Rom on it. And I believe Ebrietas is the source of the Healing Church's blood, as she was a great one that was sort of left behind. I'm not exactly certain, but I'm sure there are several other videos you can consult on there for the lore. So, what makes Ebrietas really difficult is that her attacks can hit all around her, so you have almost no safe area, and it's really difficult to get to her weak spot, which is her head. It's very easy to sort of get lost with the camera, and she has like an insta-kill in her final phase. So what you'll need to do is stay close to her and get her to bait attacks that leave her head open. If you stay far back, she uses that charge attack, which, since it's really fast, I find it's difficult to dodge. So, if I had properly dodged that attack, I'd have a good chance to get her head. And make sure you don't log on to the head, because if you get underneath her, you'll just be constantly looking up, and it'll be pretty confusing. I don't know what I did there. I sort of dodged into the attack. I swear I'm good at this game. So, Ebrietas is definitely one of my favorite fights in the game. I love her design so much. It's so Lovecraftian Cthulhu monstrosity. It looks great. I like how that in between sort of the head, she actually has like 1,000 eyes in there. Of course, nicely ties into the theme of eyes on the inside and eyes to get insight, all that stuff. Even though this is probably one of the most difficult fights in the game, I never felt it was unfair. It felt perfectly balanced. There wasn't anything that was like a total bullshit thing about this. So, that's good. I think it's really cool that it's this creepy hidden fight. And yeah, everything about it's great. Like this is a boss to perfectly exemplify why I love Bloodborne. So, right there, you see I was able to knock her down and get some nice attacks on the head, and that's where you do massive damage. I believe it is possible to get a riposte on her if you get the right angle. So in this phase, this is where she has buffed herself. So when she does that, this is a call from beyond, and it's 3 attacks. So sprint for your life if she does that, because I think if you get hit by like more than one of those, it's probably an insta-kill. Maybe that attack is a little bullshit, but you know, it's telegraphed enough, and it fires like a regular laser, so it's not like it's a homing thing or anything like that, so it's not like Micolash. We'll get to him later. That's really the attack you want to watch out for. Get that parry. Alright, I think I finished her with a riposte. It's always so satisfying to pull something like that off. And there we go. Ebrietas on the first try. And pose for the win. Defeating Ebrietas, you'll get the Great Ice Chalice, however you say it. And that'll get you into another dungeon. Alright, here we go. The probably most universally annoying boss in all of Souls game, and that is Micolash, host of the nightmare. Or, since he has a cage on his head, I like to refer to him as Micolash Cage. I'm not the only one to make that joke, but this guy's pretty hilarious and pretty annoying. I've got to give him credit though, like all the voice acting and the story behind him is amazingly hilarious. I love the concept of this fight. It can just be really annoying to deal with, but it's entertaining, that's for sure. It's not like a annoying pissed off. So basically what this fight boils down to is you chase him around this labyrinth and wait for him to actually go into the boss area where you can fight him. I found that if you were always really close to him, he would just be stuck in an endless cycle of running around. But if I kept my distance, then he would actually decide to wait a bit and then take the right turn to actually go into the boss area where you fight him. So this is in the Nightmare of Mensis, and I believe Mensis was another one of the schools, colleges similar to Bergenworth. So basically after you progress through here, you get to him and he's the host of the nightmare. Yet after you kill him, the nightmare still remains, so I'm not sure how it works. This first part is ridiculously easy. Basically the only way you can die is if you just get greedy or get caught in some bad luck. You defeat his 2 skeleton minions, and then the only attack he has is to use the Augur of Ebrietas. And basically my only issue was just that he would use it when I was busy attacking and I could get hit by it. As long as you just stick close to him and lay into him like I like to do with Eileen's blades, it's not at all difficult. This isn't the annoying part of the fight. That comes in stage 2 when we get to the second area. He's going to gain a bunch of extra attacks, and that's going to be really not fun to deal with. So again, if you just back him up against a wall, he can't hop back. But he's not finished yet. You can't hear any of the game audio right now, obviously, but you know, if for some reason you haven't heard all of his dialogue, make sure you go check it out. Now, I didn't do it in this fight, but be sure to go down at some point to the left of those stairs, because there's a hidden rune down there and a bunch of enemies and goodies for you to collect. So this second stage is the really annoying part. He likes to jump through those mirror portals, and then he'll teleport to a different area. You've got to run around and find him again, and then he may just run back up again and do it all over. It's very frustrating. But still, I like the idea, the fact that you're in this labyrinth-like maze, you have no idea where you're going, you're being taunted by this guy, there's enemies after you. So conceptually, it's interesting. I think you might be able to land a few hits on him if he's running, but I didn't really bother because I more just wanted to get to the actual fight. And the layout of this area can be confusing because you think that some stairs are going to go and lead you one way and they actually lead you another. So I think I got lucky here and he actually did went the proper way. So what he'll do is he'll jump down here, and you can cheese this fight because as long as you're on that balcony, he won't move. So if you do want to cheese it, what you can do is just, you know, hit him with poison darts and shoot him, a bunch of stuff like that. And on later playthroughs I sometimes do that for fun because I just don't want to have to deal with this second stage. So he'll lock himself in that boss room, and you'll need to run all the way back up to the top, and that will allow you to drop down. And he'll do this big, lovely rant about the mind, and you know, during the fight I decided to actually stop and listen to it. So the first thing what you want to do is make sure you can get the drop on him. What the attack that he has in this phase is a Call Beyond, and you can get that attack if you're like an arcane build, and he also has a really weak punch that doesn't do a lot of damage. But basically you want to stick close to him and pray that he never uses a Call Beyond. If he uses that in here, you might get one shot. It does an insane amount of damage. It's a very empty room with no cover. So just stick close to him, lay into him, and hopefully he won't use that attack. And he's waking up and he'll forget everything because he forgot to use a dream journal to remember his dreams. And this will allow you to unlock the pathway to the upper level to get to Mergo's loft. And also you get the Mensis cage, and I love the look of it. It's such a silly looking thing, but it's pretty interesting, this idea that you have to use it as some kind of like tinfoil hat brain telecommunicator thing to the cosmos, and I don't know exactly how it's supposed to work, but nevertheless it looks pretty silly. And with that, you progress to the final required boss, which is Mergo's wet nurse. So we've made it to the top of the loft, and here we can see that Queen Yharnam's here, and she's crying because I believe that Mergo is like her child. I think the idea is that it was between her and Erden, whose tomb was where we earlier fought Gascoigne. I will admit I'm very fuzzy on the details of like why we're doing this. I think it's because the Moon Presence, who we'll see later, is commanding Gehrman to fight other Great Ones, and therefore we as a hunter, when eventually you're going to slay a Great One, that's Mergo, who we can't see him, but he's there in the crib. So as soon as you get close to this crib, the wet nurse will appear, and this is also a formless Great One. Now this fight is, it's not really that good. This wet nurse may look intimidating, but really her main attack gets her locked into a pattern. It's very easy to get behind her and punish. Really, my only issue was just that I sort of got almost messed up in the Jimi Hendrix Purple Haze attack that you'll see in a bit. So, yeah, when she starts along that path of destruction, just get behind her, and then it's very easy to get many hits on her. She gives you plenty of windows to heal. Most of the attacks are telegraphed. Honestly, I think at this point I was just being a little overly cocky and just trying to get the fight to end as fast as possible. And I don't even know if I've ever died to this fight, even New Game Plus. So this here is the only attack you need to watch out for, and it's again, the Jimi Hendrix Purple Haze. So in this there'll be 2 of her. One of them, they'll just seem to like appear out of nowhere. So my only issue was just sort of getting caught in attacks from the second one while I was focused on the first. But the haze goes away after a short little bit, so even if you wanted to, theoretically, you could just run away during this time and not even bother attacking and just wait for it to end. I decided to just go with it, just tank all the damage, and it sort of turned out all right for me in the end. What is kind of disappointing is this is technically the final boss if you take certain endings. Because after this you have a choice as to which ending you want based on whether or not you decide to fight Gehrman and whether or not you have collected the required number of 1/3 of umbilical cords. But with that, Mergo will be defeated. What I think is interesting is that you don't actually get a victory screen until after a few seconds when Mergo actually dies. I mean, you can't hear it, but the crying that was constantly going on just stopped. And with that, we get a different message: Nightmare slain. And from this, don't forget afterwards to make sure you go back down the elevator, because Queen Yharnam, she will bow and then disappear. And then once we actually do go back to the Hunter's Dream, you'll see it's gone through a little bit of a makeover. This will get us to the endings we can choose from. But first, we must conquer the DLC, The Old Hunters. So if you talk to the doll, she'll explain that you have to go and talk to Gehrman. So if you do, that will trigger the ending. I'll talk more about that in the actual ending segment. So again, if you don't want to see the DLC or the Chalice dungeons, you can just skip to the time listed in the description. Okay, welcome to the DLC for Bloodborne, The Old Hunters. We begin with one of the most amazing, epic, and difficult fights in all of Blood Souls, and that is Ludwig the Accursed. So, you can enter the Hunter's Nightmare by being grabbed by the Lesser Amygdala outside the Cathedral Ward, and this will be after you get the Eye of a Blood Drunk Hunter after defeating Vicar Amelia, and you progress through the literal river of blood to get to this lovely creature. This is Ludwig, who used to be the main hunter for the church, which was founded by Laurence, the first vicar. So the idea with the Hunter's Nightmare is that it's this place where all of those hunters who have sinned become blood drunk of the beast scourge, they are sort of trapped here forever, forever roaming, hunting beasts, being tormented. So Ludwig himself, he's morphed into this monstrosity of a creature, and it's time for us to put him down. So this fight is very difficult and unrelenting because you have to be like absolutely perfect in your dodge timing, and I think the toughest thing for me is that a lot of Ludwig's attacks, they sort of reach to the side as well, so simply dodging to the left or right doesn't work. You've got to be very careful about it or time it properly iframe. He has a lot of jump attacks and charge attacks that can almost one-shot you, even with my very giant health bar that I had right here. You really also got to watch out for that frost breath. What's good is if you're close while he uses it, then you can get a lot of good attacks on him, because once he starts it, he's locked into it. I'm not sure if you would go up this boss or not. I've helped a lot of people beat him, but it does make it difficult since you have such low health. That jump attack, basically he goes on the roof, and then there's about a 3-second delay, so you kind of have to like iframe through it. I don't know, sometimes I get very unlucky with it. One thing that's also important is to listen to his vocal cues. He sort of makes a bit of a sound when he's going to do his charge attack. Obviously you can't hear it right now, but pay attention to those. I really like this fight because it's like a really good combination of difficulty, a good lore, and it's well designed. Like, he does have a few bullshit attacks like that jumping attack. As you see, I nearly died from it. But at the same time, it's enjoyable enough that the difficulty doesn't bother me too much. And then, basically, you just beat on him for this, and once you get him down to half health, you'll get him into his second phase, where it's almost an entirely different boss fight, and that's the other thing I like, how it really switches up the formula. So here, Ludwig sort of retains some form of his humanity, and he recognizes his sword and what he once used to be, so in a way this is his form of getting to die with honor, fighting as a warrior, not a beast. And it's also a bit of great fan service, since they finally managed to get the Moonlight Greatsword that's been a hallmark of all the Souls games into Bloodborne. So, I believe that's the sword you get from Seath the Scaleless, but I never really used it in Dark Souls or Dark Souls 2, but it's a reference, and it's in all of them. I saw a great comment on one video that it's Ludwig von Beethoven wielding the Holy Moonlight Sonata sword, so some really great Easter eggs good job. So, in this stage, he swings the sword around with many slow attacks, and sometimes he likes to throw an extra swing in there with a bit of a delay. So, you want to make sure you dodge the fast ones, but then don't dodge too quickly. He also likes to use a lot of AoE attacks, but they have such a long wind-up, so you should be able to have enough time to get out of there. And again, the odd delay is really what you have to watch for, because I find that I have a tendency to basically spam the dodge button when it comes to very tense moments, and you don't want to do that. You want to be very aware. The Orphan of Kos, he's really good at abusing that as well. So this is the main AoE you need to watch out for, and that is he hits you with a small one and then slams the sword down like that. I think it's best to actually stay close to him when he does that, because if you're far away, he seems to be much better at lining up, and if you get caught in that ray of death, it'll be probably a one-shot, unless you're very lucky. And I find this phase it's still difficult, but it's a little easier than the first phase, because I can get some, normal sort of sense of direction as to where he's got the sword, and rather than the randomness of all of his beast attacks. I really also like when you actually do get the great sword as well. It's probably one of my favorite weapons besides Ludwig's Holy Blade. But just constantly be aware of his AoEs. Here's where I think I almost died. Yeah, if I hadn't been able to roll out of that, I probably would have died. You gotta be very careful and stay close to him. And don't jump into his moonbeams when he throws them. Like that. Don't do that. I like that AoE better because it's easier to dodge. I don't really have much else to say about this boss, as I am about to get the victory here, but he's easily one of my favorites. I don't know if he's my number one favorite boss in the game. It's very difficult for me to decide that, but easily like top 5, maybe even top 3 material. And once again, finishing a boss with a parry is always satisfying. Okay, strap yourselves in, because this is going to be a long fight and I don't really have much to say. So, what's pretty funny about this is I didn't realize that the boss was going to start once you opened the door. Like, I thought you could open the door and walk in the arena. So I wasn't fully prepared. Like, I had a bunch of echoes on me that I wanted to bank that I hadn't gotten the chance to. So my first reaction was to try to run back in, and I was like, oh shit, what do I do? But thankfully, if you play everything right and are smart about it, this isn't too big of a fight, or too difficult. It's just a bit of a long one. So this is the Living Failures winner of, most depressing boss title of all time, according to Democracy. Basically, they don't have that complex of attacks. Either they'll stand in the back and spam you with arcane magic that's pretty simple to dodge, or they'll come up with you and try to hit you. Now, if they do that, their attacks do hit really hard. That's the only thing to watch out for. But they are telegraphed, so as long as you're not being stupid and dodging properly, you shouldn't have too much of a problem. So there's usually only about 4 at a time, and they all share the same health bar. So once you kill one, another one will respawn. So you basically just keep killing them, and eventually you win. I do think the arena is well designed, though. Like, it's not really a badly designed boss fight. Like this tree that's in the middle, it's good for crowd control and cover from all the spells. You just have to be smart about it. So I believe that these were the failed attempts to become great ones, because at this point you've just gone through the healing workshop, or the healing ward. I forget exactly what it's called. The research hall. That's right. You've just gone through the research hall. You've seen all of these experiments, and you see that this is what the church was doing. How they're trying to, the same direction. So one thing I jokingly do, because I saw the Democracy do it, is you stand behind the tree and just do the make contact gesture. It's kind of a little funny thing to do. It's entertaining. So there's not, again, too much else to it, basically. Just run around, try and take them out one at a time, as is the sort of rule for most of the gank squad type bosses. If you can keep them separate, it's a lot easier to handle them. Just get pot shots in. And even then, most of the time, only one or two of them will try to charge you, so it's not like you're going to get that overwhelmed. You can actually parry their attacks, but you can't get a critical on them. I didn't realize that until afterwards, so that's why I never bothered doing it in this video. So right around here, this is where they decide to do the meteor strike. So it comes from the left side, so I didn't know where it was the first time. But again, you just get behind, and then you're safe. And they like to spam this attack quite often. But again, they're totally immobile during this time, so if you were brave and adventurous, you probably could go out and get a few pot shots in on them while they're stuck. That is one thing that I guess makes the fight, not as maybe difficult or challenging as it could have been if perhaps it was totally random where the attacks came from. But it's always from one direction, so once you figured out that it's the right side of the arena when you walk in, then you've got nothing to worry about, nothing to fear. This is probably the weakest boss in the DLC, but then again, it is a little challenging because to be the best one, because all three of the other bosses in this DLC are just so good. So, take that for what you will. But yes, this is another bit of a long fight. So here we go. I run behind the tree and then I just do make contact. And this is like, I guarantee you have to do this, otherwise you just automatically lose the fight. I don't know what it is, but there's some kind of thing that happens. So always make contact. It's the best solution for most situations. Again, this might have gone a little better had I been prepared, but I was thinking, I'll open the door, look inside, and see if it's boss, and if it is, then I'll run back, go to the lantern, level up. But unfortunately, they got smart. Now, here was one thing that pissed me off, though. I was going to do my whole hide and make contact thing, and then I got hit because it turns out that since one of them spawned in while the meteor attack was going on, he wasn't stuck in the holding the animation, so he took a cheeky shot at me, and I was very annoyed by that. So I was like, that's it, you all are dying. You all are dying. And there we go. We're putting those living failures out of their misery. So this will allow you to enter the Clocktower so that you can fight the fan favorite Lady Maria. The sky and the cosmos are one. So Lady Maria is an interesting fight because her attacks never really change style. More so, she just has extra damage added to them with fire and blood. And it's nice that the lantern is right outside the boss room, because this is a very tricky fight if you're not very skilled. But it's quite a good one. There's so much to this fight and this story that's really great. So we come here, and this looks like it's Lady Maria's corpse, because it looks like she's slit herself. And so, when we go to inspect her, it turns out she's still alive. I also love how goofy my character looks. One thing I think that's really interesting about her dialogue is how she says, a corpse should be left alone, but you're much much too curious. And I think that could also reference the corpse of Mother Kos lying on the beach where the Orphan of Kos now is, because we'll get more into the lore of that when we talk about the fishing hamlet. So she's here to defend you from uncovering the secrets. So with Lady Maria, it's best to basically play her like you're playing one of the hunter NPCs. If you're really good at parrying, then it's not too difficult of a fight. But the parry timing for a few attacks can be weird, and it gets a little nerve-wracking near the end where a failed parry might mean a one-shot. I don't know how I managed to do that. I managed to parry her, dodge behind her, and miss the attack. I found that I have a habit of sort of thinking that I'm going to get hit while I parry, and then I dodge forward to get close and get out of the stun lock. But all I end up doing is dashing behind them. So Lady Maria, she's believed to be Gehrman's lover because she looks very similar to the doll. And I believe she was like one of the people who helped run the research hall. These hunters, they found the corpse of Mother Kos, and they took it from the fishing village, for which they were all cursed. The curse was placed on the town, as that babbling fisherman says when you walk into the fishing hamlet. And she felt really bad for what she has done, which is why she got rid of her main weapon, the Rakuyo. It's why you found it down a well, being guarded by those two shit whales. So it's a very sad story about how she's so desperate to stop you that she resorts to blood arts, even though she doesn't like them, and she resorts to all these tactics. It makes for such a really great in-depth boss fight. I think one thing that I probably did in this I should have done was stay too far away from her, because she likes to spam that one dodge attack of hers, and that it's really difficult to dodge because she basically homes in on you. You gotta dodge at the last possible second. So don't forget to leave good notes at the beginning, because if your note gets rated, it'll rejuvenate your health. It's saved me on more than one occasion. So again, this is a fight where you have to be very careful near the end, because with fire and blood, her attacks are hitting like a freight train, and I'm having to use 2 vials for almost every strike. Let's see right there, you have to dodge at the last possible second. So I did beat Maria on my first try, but it wasn't an easy fight, that's for sure. This required a lot of skill to pull it off. Easily one of the best boss fights in the game. Great story, well designed, not difficult, like overbearing, and yeah, all around great experience. So after you defeat Maria, be sure to grab the Celestial Rune. It'll be over back near the lantern, and when you hold this up, this will allow you to gain access to the fishing hamlet. I really love that area because it feels like something H.P. Lovecraft would have wrote about. Like, because I know that a lot of his stories, they take place in maybe Arctic research stations or fishing villages, or stuff by the sea. And so it seems that it's finally come full circle, and we finally got to an area that seems to be directly like that. And then of course we encounter a Cthulhu monster at the end. So it's just really great to see it all totally perfectly come to fruition. So one boss that's pretty well hidden is Laurence, the first Vicar. So you can come to this area near the beginning of the DLC, but nothing's going to happen because you don't have the special item. So what you need to do is the main elevator that leads up to the research hall after you've beaten Ludwig. You want to send the elevator up, but don't get on it, and then the bottom part will come up, as a trick that you do with most elevators in Souls games. And so then if you look on the altar, there will be, I believe it's called the Eye of Laurence, but there's an eye that belongs to him. And so now that you have this item, when you go back, he will wake up and you can fight him. Now, I think it's interesting that his design is, he's the Cleric Beast, basically. Now, story-wise, I can understand why he's similar. It seems that this is a common form that a blood-drunk hunter will transform into. But I guess from a design point, game-wise, it is a little lazy. He's literally the Cleric Beast with fire AoEs until the second half. Now, as I mentioned with the Cleric Beast, I didn't like how the arena made it difficult to strafe around him because it was a very narrow bridge, and I definitely don't have that problem as much in here since you're fighting in a large open hall. It's just that he has such a heavy damage range. He hits like a motherfucking freight train. Like, I'm sorry for the swearing, but just, there's no way to describe it really. Like, I knew that this would be one of the toughest boss fights. I think I actually died to him more than the Orphan of Kos, funnily enough. So, the same rule to the Cleric Beast applies here. You want to stick to that booty. But it's made a little more difficult when every attack has a bit of an extra fire blast to it. You'll still get hit sort of by the fire, even if you've dodged the hit. And also, the run-up to this boss is very difficult. You've got to go through like 3 or 4 hunter NPCs, and then there's that giant axe bell-waving guy at the top. So even if you sprint past him, he's usually right in the door. And that guy hits hard too. He's like a mini-boss in himself. But he does drop like 10 blood vials, so I guess he'll give you a refund if you do happen to use a few fighting him. The best thing to do is if you can sort of get on this side and keep him in a struggle. He seems to only use this little bitch slap backhand attack. That's probably your best option, but even then it's difficult to keep that going for a while. So basically what happens at half health is basically you just sort of says forget the legs and forget the booty to attack, and then he just starts leaking lava out of his torso and vomiting it everywhere, and I mean everywhere. Like, if I were to do this fight again, I would probably bring like everything fire resistance to this. There's like no easy way to handle this second stage. You just gotta be extra lucky and extra careful and find the perfect way, because you can't attack him from behind because he's leaving lava everywhere, and his front attack has like a perfect 180 of his front. Best thing to do is see if you can get him to do the vomiting lava attack, but even then he just leaks it out everywhere else, so there's just like nowhere to go. You have to sort of stand back from him, but then he sort of spams at you with this that charge attack, and there's like almost no limit to how many times he can do that. So honestly, I'm sort of at a loss for how you could properly do this. I'm very surprised myself that I was able to beat him, because this was, of all the fights I did against him, the first time I got him into the second stage, and yet also the time that I beat him. It's so easy to get accidentally sort of like dragged in and caught in that lava. Like, I don't really have any other recommendations than just dodge insanely. So, overall this is sort of a mid-range fight for me. I like it better than the Living Failures, more because it has a better story behind it. It's interesting that, Laurence himself did become a beast just not that Cleric Beast that we saw in the intro. But at the same time, I feel that like it's almost too crazy of a difficulty at the end. Like, I don't know. It's just the fact that there's so much lava that just be a little annoying because it's so easy to get caught in it. But with enough perseverance, you'll do it. And the video clip's gonna end soon for this boss because I was so excited that I beat him, I just accidentally pressed save. Okay, it all comes down to this. The ultimate nightmare of a boss. This is, of course, the Orphan of Kos, the boss that I had heard so many horror stories about and was dreading for so long. You progress through the fishing village and finally get down to the bottom where this body, this corpse that Maria talked about, awaits. And so that is the corpse of Mother Kos, a dead great one that's washed on shore. But her unborn child still lives. And I thought they smelled bad on the outside. So, this is the orphan, and this just goes to show you how powerful great ones are, because he's a total newborn, and he's still going to kick your ass. And, what's more so is this shrimp type thing that he's going to be beating you up with is his placenta. Like, that is some so nasty imagery. You can't hear it here, but you actually can hear him cry, sort of sobbing softly, and as the Democracy said, trust me, you'll be the one crying at the end of this. So, with Orphan, he's just got so many crazy attacks, and he jumps around like as a flying squirrel on acid. Like, you've got to be absolutely perfect in every way to get this down and just be totally relentless. So, the best thing I find, of course, is to stick really close to him. Don't let him use many different attacks. But also be careful, because a lot of his attacks, he'll delay them, and then he'll be able to get you perfectly to where you were dodging. I mentioned this with a few other boss fights, but basically, like, don't spam the dodge attack, because you gotta wait like about half a second, and don't get too panicky. I find some of his other attacks, specifically the one where he jumps back and then drags his placenta along with him, you actually have to sort of dodge towards him to get out of the way, and that's something different. Usually your instinct is to dodge backwards or to the side, but you see that one, you want to dodge forward. So basically this fight's just really difficult because he's got incredible damage, he's very fast, he's got no discernible weakness. Unless you are like a parry god, then maybe he might be a little easier. And in his second phase, he's just like, beating on you so much when he decides to two-hand his placenta. The trick is, like, never lose your cool and panic. Make sure every dodge is, like, properly coordinated. Be careful if he starts to throw a bit of his placenta into the ground, because that means there's going to be a follow-up AoE. So story-wise, I believe the idea is that this nightmare that you're in is a representation of what happened in the real world. So what happened is these fishers in the fishing hamlet, they came across the corpse of Kos, and then learned about the Great Ones. And then many of the church hunters, like German and Gascoigne and Laurence and all of them, or maybe not Gascoigne, but German, Maria, Ludwig, Laurence, they came across to this area and then decided to experiment on Kos, and the villagers felt that this was an unnatural perversion of nature, and so thus they asked Kos to curse the hunters, and As is stated in one of the item descriptions, the Great Ones are sympathetic upon nature and will help those who call upon them. And so, from this they decided to lay a curse on the hunters. Thus, after they die, they are trapped in the hunter's nightmare, those who are blood-drunk forever to remain. So, all in all, it's a very great story. So, again, this phase, just careful dodging, don't get too greedy. I liked using the bold paper to help out. If he does this lightning attack, this is why I don't fight him near the corpse, because I did, and on my first try I almost won, but I got one shot by getting hit by all of those bolts at once. Some people like to fight him in the ocean, because then it means you have a lot of time to dodge lightning. And with that, you'll be able to conquer the so-called most difficult boss in all of Soulsborne. Now, make sure afterwards you don't leave right away. What you want to do is slay this ghostly apparition over Kos's corpse. And then doing so gets you the proper ending to the DLC. Just give you this nice little cutscene. And of course the Nightmare Slain, showing that you defeated a true Great One. And you get this nice little spoken bit from the mutated fishing guy from the beginning. So I guess the idea is that you've sort of ended the curse by sort of destroying the evil. Now it returns to the sea. It's free because now the moon's gone. Or something like that. I'm not sure. But in any case, now you're ready to get to the endings. So, as a quick intro to this section for the Chalice dungeons, I'm going to show you every boss from every main Chalice, that is the non-randomized ones. So for those of you who don't know, this Chalice section, these are dungeons you can create, and they're made from a bunch of preset rooms. You can make ones that are randomized, or you can do the main ones. Those aren't randomized. So we're going to focus on the non-random ones. And as you progress through, you'll go down a layer of a dungeon, and you'll eventually be getting to more difficult bosses. And so the idea is for you to eventually get to the final dungeon and the final layer where you can fight Queen Yharnam. And defeating her will net you a trophy, and that'll probably be the last one you get before you can get the Platinum trophy. So this next section I'm going to show you each of the bosses for each of the non-randomized dungeons, give you tips on how to get to Queen Yharnam, and also show you which ones you have to do and which ones you don't have to, because there are quite a lot. And some of the bosses are duplicates, so I'm not going to show you all of them unless I feel it's absolutely necessary. You'll hear more about that when we get to that. So, with all that being said and done, let's begin. So, the first chalice you'll go through is the Pthumerian Chalice. I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation of that word a lot. But this one you'll get from the Blood-Starved Beast. And I went through this chalice at a very high level, so as you can see, it was a piece of cake for me. I wasn't even really using my main weapons. I was just experimenting with side weapons I don't normally use. So this is the Undead Giant. Over the course of the chalices, you're going to fight 3 variations. One that has the regular swords, one that has a cannon, and another that has a giant ball and chain. And they're not really too difficult if you know how to figure them out. Again, I'm going to be wrecking these first few bosses because I was a little over-leveled. The good thing about the Chalice dungeons is they don't scale with New Game. And so after the Undead Giant, there's going to be these Merciless Watchers and Chieftains. But we fight them again later, so I'm just going to skip through this fight because there's nothing really too fancy to see here that you won't see later. And then the final boss of the dungeon is going to be the Watchdog of the Old Lords. Again, I'm not going to show this fight in full because later on you'll fight him in the Defiled Chalice, and I felt that fight was much more interesting because you only have half your health. So if you want to see more on this boss, just wait until we get to the Defiled Chalice. And after you complete him, you'll get the next chalice, which will be the Central Demero Chalice. So this one is pretty similar to the first. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult, and you can just get through all of this chalice, you can get the next one. So you'll see the pattern here. I decided to leave this boss fight in full. This is the Beast Possessed Soul, because he is sort of unique. You only encounter one of this type of enemy in the main game. So, you know, it was a bit of a more interesting thing to see this enemy that you didn't see really at all used more. It was kind of nice. Moveset-wise, he's not really too difficult if you're playing seriously. You can easily parry him when he swipes, and his fireball attack is pretty easy to dodge. The main thing you have to watch for is that, like, when he starts swinging, he's going for a lot longer than you would expect. So you don't want to get caught in that. But he's definitely not the hardest beast that you'll fight throughout these dungeons. And again, I was probably still quite over-leveled here. I don't think it was really until I got to the lower Pthumerian Chalice that I actually was more of an appropriate level for that area. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. That is the good thing, since it doesn't scale, you can always just wait until you're much higher level, or in like New Game 4 or something like that, and come back and wreck them. And the last boss is the Keeper of the Old Lords. Oh, sorry, the second boss. But I won't show this fight in full because, again, we're going to fight him in the Defiled Chalice, and it's much more interesting then, since you have half your health. So the final boss, real final boss of this chalice, is the Pthumerian Descendant, and again, I'm not going to show this fight in full because we fight him later in the Great Pthumerian Chalice, the very last one, where he's a lot more difficult. So with that, we've completed another chalice, and we're going to move on to the lower Pthumerian Chalice. This is where I personally found things were starting to get a little more difficult. So once again, we fight the Merciless Watchers and Chieftain. This is, of course, where I found that I couldn't just simply run in. Basically, the two main ones that'll charge you with axe-type weapons, they're pretty easy to parry, and then there's this one that hangs in the back with a gun, and he can't really do much to attack you. So as long as you just do a good job of crowd control and keeping them behind pillars, yeah, you shouldn't have too much trouble. Again, at this point, I think I was still going with the over cockiness that I had from the previous two dungeons, so I thought it would be a little more of a cakewalk than it actually was, which almost ended up getting me killed. So, you know, that's an important lesson from Bloodborne, is never let yourself get too overconfident. And I feel that once you get one of the axe wielders down or the gunman down, it's not too difficult of a fight. Again, the parry windup is very generous, so just get good at parrying, as you should be at this point in the game. If you're not, then I don't know, don't have much advice for you in that case. Not really the biggest fan of these guys. It is a little more difficult to have three of them fighting you, but at the same time it is an enemy that you'll be fighting throughout the dungeons as normal enemies. That is another complaint I have with these chalices, is that they do feel like a very extra tacked on way, because many of the bosses are simply repeats of enemies. You know, you'll go through, fight sort of a mini boss to flip the lever to unlock the door to the boss, and then the boss you fight is just another one of him. I mean, despite all my complaints about that, there still are some very good bosses hiding within these dungeons. We haven't really gotten to them yet. And, you know, it definitely brought up the difficulty a bit, although, like, I hate the Defiled Chalice so much. We have difficult bosses, and then how can we make it more difficult? Let's give you half your health. So, that's just brutal. But with that done, we can move on to the next boss of the dungeon, which is the Undead Giant. And this one, he is probably the toughest one of them, because he's got this ball and chain. So basically, he has this weak spot on his side. If you can get in there, get a good hit, it'll really stun him very easily. You can get massive damage in there. I'm not sure if you can then do a riposte on him. I don't think I was able to. But the main thing you have to watch out for is when he's whipping his back balls around at you. Because they do a ton of damage. I don't know how many times I got hit during this fight, but I remember that this was one of the first bosses in the Chalices I was dying to a lot. Because if you get in close, get hit by those, then it just takes a really giant chunk of your health. So I found the best strategy was to just do like only one hit and then back away out of the range. It does take quite a while, but it's very safe. I mean, perhaps if you're more aggressive, you could figure out a way, but I'm not sure, because I tried sort of just getting up at him, but I don't think it was an attack you could dodge or iframe through. So as far as I know, it's really the only way that you could do it safely. I mean, later on you'll see I started investing a lot in Arcane. Perhaps that could be another easier way to handle this boss. But for me, just the ball and chain has such a massive hitbox and range that I think the only real thing you could do is just stay away. The design of this boss is interesting. It's a little bit more different from some of the other things you fought. I just feel that like that attack that he does, it just does so much. Like, technically I was over leveled for this, with a ton of vitality, and even then he just still is able to take that much off. And then, of course, the other thing I kept on getting caught by was that he likes to follow up the ball and chain with another attack, and then I kept getting caught by that. So perhaps maybe put a few points into Arcane, and always be careful for that secondary counterattack, because otherwise he's just totally gonna wreck you up. I'll use this time to talk about another important element of the Chalice dungeons, and that is the hidden optional rooms. So every time you're in a transition period between a boss area or the starting area, to the side, if you see the walls are sort of lit up, then that'll be a door you can go and lift up to an optional area, and that'll usually have some ritual materials in there. And it's important to check these, because there's a lot of little extra goodies hidden in there, and you'll get a lot of other extra blood echoes and insight and all that stuff. And some of them you can even find bath messengers that sell special versions of items where you can put different gemstones onto them. But the most important thing about these is that the whole reason you'll need to play some of these chalices is to get ritual materials so that you can create new chalices. And a lot of times the material you don't get from beating the boss of the area, you get it from exploring the side area. So, for example, I guess you can parry him, or riposte him. But back to what I was saying, for example, if you want to get the main Great Pthumerian Chalice with Queen Yharnam in it, then you have to have a few materials, including one called red jelly. And the only way you can get red jelly outside of finding two in the main game is by finding them in the hidden side areas of either the lower Loran Chalice or the Great Eyes Chalice, or Eyes, I'm not sure how you say it. There's plenty of weird words to go around in Bloodborne for this. But regardless of all that, it's always important to check these optional areas if you're specifically looking for ritual material, because you never know if it's going to be what you'll be needing for the next chalice. And with that all said and done, I'm hopefully going to finish this guy off soon. Again, it's an endurance game, just not getting greedy and waiting to bait the attacks so that you can eventually get through to him. So the next boss is actually you fighting Rom again, but you already saw me fight him before, so I don't think I really need to show it again, because once again it was a very long and difficult fight, and I still hadn't learned to properly not attack the head, as it's not a weak point. But you know, some people just never learn. Again, you gotta watch for I find that the spiders teleport in weirdly. That's about it. But this is one of the few dungeons where there's actually a fourth layer, and I think the only main one that I know of. So this fourth one is the regular Bloodletting Beast, and this guy was quite a pain for me. He has that one punch attack he opened with, where it just seems to stretch across like the entire room, and it seems to lock onto you instantly. The main way I recommend handling this is use a large weapon, a long weapon, so that you can hit his head. I found the difficulty is that like enemies like the Cleric Beast, you can't lock onto a specific part, you can only lock onto the center of their body. So if you're too close, you just get stuck in this endless cycle of like looking up, circling around. So the best thing I find is to keep your distance, stay in front, and try to dodge the attacks where you can. But again, that long wind-up punch, it just seems to have like a crazy hitbox, and does insane amounts of damage. Fire weapons, of course, are always good for beasts, and I think that was the main thing that helped me, was being able to output enough damage so that I didn't have to take too many hits. Now there is a version of the Bloodletting Beast you fight later, but that one has a few more different attacks, and he's a bit different because he doesn't have a head. So that's why I'm showing both of these, because I think they're different enough. In the long run, I feel that this one isn't as difficult, and that's because the headless version has this earthquake type attack. You'll see when we get to him, and the headless one just loves to spam that attack. And it can be very difficult because you can't really properly dodge it. You have to try to iframe through it, or at least that's what I found worked best. This one thankfully doesn't seem to use it as much, because I didn't remember having a problem with him doing it too much, or having to learn the proper timing for the iframe. This was one that definitely took me a while to get down, but the trick I found was to be aggressive, use a fire weapon, and use a long weapon so that you can get good hits on the head. So that will complete the lower Pthumerian Chalice, and with that you'll unlock the Defiled Chalice. Now, the next chalice I'm showing you footage from is the Hintertomb Chalice. You don't have to do this one, it's completely optional. It isn't required to get to Queen Yharnam, but I want to show it in any case, just so you can sort of see it for completion sense. You'll see the first boss is just a regular pig. It's very easily dealt with. And the next boss is the canon version of the Undead Giant. Now, I will say, when I finally did the Hintertomb Chalice, I was incredibly overleveled, as you can see here. So, these of course are not in order that I would recommend them. The Hintertomb, it's just sort of for extra goodies and stuff. Perhaps this Undead Giant with the cannon would have been more interesting had I not been 20 levels ahead of where I should have been. And then the last of the bosses is the Blood-Starved Beast again. I think that this could have been a more interesting fight had I not been overleveled, because you'll see that you actually have to fight him in these pools of poison, and of course he himself already does poison, But just the thing here, as you can see, is that I'm just so over-leveled for this area that, I beat him in like 30 seconds flat, pretty much. So do the Hintertomb not too late in the game, because afterwards you'll unlock the lower Hintertomb Chalice. Again, the first boss is just a brain sucker enemy. You fight tons of those already throughout the main game. Though the second boss of this chalice is a little more interesting. This is the Forgotten Madman. So I'll show this fight in full. Again, probably overleveled for it. And I don't even have that much invested in Arcane, and you can see how much damage my gun's doing. It is, I think, a nice fight. You start fighting off this one NPC, and he's got a nice range of attacks. He uses the Holy Blade, he's got the Augur of Ebrietas, and I think he might be able to do the Call from Beyond. And so then when you get him down to half health, he has another one show up with another set of attacks. Only thing is again, make sure you're proper level, because otherwise it just turns fights into a bit of a joke. It's like you being the level of New Game Plus 7, but running through the game for New Game Plus 2 or something like that. Still, I think it's a nice fight. So the last boss of the lower Hintertomb Chalice is another unique one worth showing, and that's the Pthumerian Elder. Sort of similar in style to the Pthumerian Descendant, but with a sort of different style of attacks. I like that he sort of teleports around and tries to strike at you when you're not looking. That's nice. And perhaps had I not been insanely overpowered, it might have been a little more of a challenge for me. As it is, I do like the style. And it is cool to be fighting Pthumerians. I believe the lore concept is that the Pthumerians were this ancient elder race that knew about the powers of the blood somehow, but they've long passed away, at least most of them have. And so then the scholars of Byrgenwerth, they would use these chalices to explore these areas, and within the chalice they found Ebrietas, who is a great one left behind, the daughter of the cosmos. So, it's cool to sort of see this era from a time long ago. So the next chalice that is mandatory is the Ailing Loran Chalice, and you'll get it from defeating the Amygdala in the Nightmare. The first boss is just another beast-possessed soul. He's a little more tougher than the first one you fought, but same strategies apply. Things start to get really tough, though. This was the first chalice that I sort of put on hold and went and leveled up more, and then came back to. So the second one you're going to fight is the Darkbeast Beast again, but I found here that he was a lot more powerful than I had anticipated. So I'm showing this fight in full because earlier in the video, when I fought the regular game Darkbeast Beast, I fought him with co-op help. So I guess this is my way of showing, like, hey, I'm able to do it solo. I don't need NPCs to help me with everything. For the most part, at least. This is actually one of the few times where I switched up my blood gem and rune strategy to be mainly focused on parrying. I think I had it so that parry attacks did extra damage, or that I got health back from them. I can't remember what it was exactly. But that was the main thing I was trying to do. Because I had tried fighting him the normal way, and I just wasn't having any luck. And I don't know, it could have been that maybe just I was a little under level, or perhaps I was so used to being over level at this point that I'd grown a little weary of strategy. Which is interesting because, again, this Darkbeast Beast isn't like he's any different from the regular one. It's just that he's stronger, has more health. Perhaps it could be that with the strength that he has, it means if you do mess up one parry, you'll almost be dead. It's sort of a very high risk reward during this fight. isn't really too much else I can say that I didn't already end up saying in the regular fight. I like the story and design for good old skin flaps here. But I think it's just with the added damage and the poison mechanic that comes in, it can be really difficult to deal with. I think also I had tried to pick stuff that had a little more poison resistance, for example. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, but that's the main thing. You should have a good gear for poison resistance, and really work on that parrying, because you'll see for that first half of the fight where I was getting almost every parry, it was very helpful. Just the problem is that, if you mess up one, you might get totally screwed over there. So you have to really be prepared for that. As for other stuff about the chalices, I mean, I guess I would sort of compare them to like the optional areas in Dead Space 3. They aren't needed for enjoyment of the story and the main game. They are there for those who just want more. But I can sort of feel that they were an afterthought. There's these extra areas that you do if you want little extra goodies. And they're all based on a set of rooms that are, repeated throughout, just like Dead Space 3. And there's a few little interesting moments here and there, but ultimately it could have been left out. I don't think it would have hampered the game in any way, since it is optional. But, am I glad I played them? Yeah, I guess so, for the few parts, but, it's not like I'll be rushing out to, if I replay the game, then I'll be sure to replay the Chalice dungeons. Again, just like with Dead Space 3 and the optional missions in that. Not really much else to that. Again, thankfully with Chalice dungeons, they're optional. You don't have to worry about them. And I'm not going to let a little optional segment of a game ruin my main impression of it, when everything is just so well done and designed. And last important thing is I'll try to talk a little more about the brain of Mensis, because you'll need to defeat that to get a ritual item called the Living String, and that's required for the ritual for the Great Pthumerian Chalice. And you'll need to do that in the Nightmare of Mensis. But I'll try to use time during the long boss fight to talk about that later. So, this next boss fight is the Abhorrent Beast. And this boss actually made me rage quit this dungeon for a while. You'll see I'm a lot higher of a level at this point, like way further. I think actually this is in New Game Plus, whereas most of the others were done in just regular New Game. And that's because for the life of me, I just couldn't seem to get this guy down. I couldn't figure out something that worked. I even tried the cheesy strategy of just standing back and tossing poison knives at him, and that just wasn't working for me. But what I found worked best is you just gotta be aggressive as hell. You have to get in his face, stick to a side, dodge quickly, and don't let up. Because I find that he does his most brutal, hard to dodge attacks when you're far away and he's charging you. So there's no other way to do it, just fast and aggressive. As much as I hated this boss for the difficulty he presented, I think the fight was ridiculously fun once I got the hang of it. So, despite my annoyances, I think he still could rank up a little higher in my boss rankings. I think one thing that makes him challenging, it's a little similar to Orphan of Kos, is that he'll sort of have a bit of a delay on an attack that'll make you want to dodge, but then he hones in onto where you dodged and then attacks you there. But again, if you can get to the side of him during a combo, he'll sort of be locked into hitting in front of him because he can't turn. Thankfully, this isn't the Dark Souls 2 spinning on atop enemies or bosses, and that gives you a really good chance to get in and punish him on the side. I don't think he can be parried, but if so, it's a very small window of timing, and I didn't really bother that. Again, just nice, fast, strong sword, fire damage, and just keep to that side, and eventually you'll overcome him. But since he is very difficult, there's no shame in coming back in New Game Plus, or further on, because that's what I had to do, because I was just so sick of dying to him for like the 1000th time. So this next chalice is the lower Loran chalice, and you'll get this after you defeat the Abhorrent Beast in the last one, but this one is optional. You won't need to do it. The main reason you'll need to have done the Loran chalice is to get the Bastard of Loran ritual material, and there's nothing really special for the first half of this dungeon. There's just a Loran Silver Beast, which is a regular enemy you fight, and an Abhorrent Beast, which you should have already bested. They're very simple, I think, once you get the hang of it. But the last boss is a little more interesting, I guess, because it is the Loran Darkbeast, who, he's pretty much just Darkbeast Paarl from the main game. But he's got extra damage added, and it's a bit of a wider arena to fight him in. So I decided to show this full fight because, again, I wanted to show I could defeat this boss in solo, since I used co-op to defeat Darkbeast Paarl the first time. And also that since he's tougher, he's scaled for endgame, it is a much more difficult fight. The trick I find is to stay below him, which is, of course, a lot easier said than done since he moves so erratically. But if you can do that, it gives you a good chance to try and hit the legs and punish him. If you can knock him down so that he has to regenerate his lightning, you have a really good chance to do a lot of damage to him then. I also think that during this point I was sort of messing around, and that I'd pumped a ton of points into Arcane. I'd went full Arcane. So I just started using a bunch of arcane tactics like a Call Beyond or the Executioner's Gloves. Stuff that I didn't really get to make use of during the main game because I thought, hey, why not? I thought it'd be fun. Perhaps this fight could have been a little more difficult had I not been the right level for it, but again, this was, I think, almost into New Game Plus 2. Somewhere around there. So, thought, hey, let's have some fun with strategies. The same tactic for Darkbeast Paarl applies. When he's charging up, if you can, you should use that to try to damage him, because if you can do enough damage during that time, then you'll cancel out his attack. You see here I've knocked him down. It gives me a really good chance to try to get in and punish him. You can even get a parry, apparently. I don't know how I got that, because it didn't seem like I'd stunned him. But, hey, just go with it. Using long weapons is also important, which is why I liked using the Holy Blade in its two-handed form. It may be the noob sword, but everyone likes it for a reason. And other than that, that's about it. Again, you don't have to do this chalice. It's in here for completion's sake. And then the good news also about the Bastard of Loran that you need for the Great Pthumeru, the Defiled Ritual, is that you don't actually have to get it from the Abhorrent Beast. You just have to find it in an optional area of the Loran chalice. So technically I didn't have to fight the Abhorrent Beast if I didn't want to. But, again, for completion's sake. You'll see I'm getting these things called root chalices. They're basically just the same type of dungeon, but it's randomized. Nothing much to it. So, the next wonderfully amazing nightmare of a chalice is the Defiled Chalice. And you'll need the Bastard of Loran from the secret area in the Ailing Loran Chalice to enter it. So this chalice is probably the hardest part of the game for me, at least. And that's because you only have half your health. That's the sort of curse effect of the dungeon. So it makes it really annoying because, at least for the first few times I fought this Keeper of the Old Lords, it meant that he could pretty much two-shot me. And if a boss can do that, that's pretty annoying. Again, I find the trick is to parry as much as you can. The only problem is I feel that a lot of his fire attacks sometimes can't be parried. You have to wait for him to do a regular sword hit. And the problem I have is that a lot of times, I can get hit while I'm parrying. But if you do a little dash forward, you'll break out of the stun. You can get forward and stab him. But a lot of times I feel I'm already anticipating that I'm going to get stunned, and so I dash forward but then dash past, and then I miss the chance to do the critical attack. There's really no easy way to approach the Defiled Chalice bosses and dungeons, because unless you pumped like stupid amounts into vitality, which I had, or you use the runes that give you the extra health. Again, like almost every attack's a one-shot, so you have to be really, really perfect with your dodging and your timing. Funny enough, I think this boss might have actually been the hardest for me. I'm not sure. They all took me a lot to fight. So at this point, I hadn't put a lot of points into Arcane as much as before. So I wasn't like trying to spam with as much attacks. But I did that later, and you'll see it really came in handy for bosses like the Watchdog or the Defiled Amygdala. Like when you can lock on to the weak point of a boss, so that you can directly target it. That's really the very helpful trick. I don't really have too much else to say about this fight. I'm just hoping I can kill him off soon. I don't even know if co-op is really the best solution, because I think you'll only have like 25% of your health. Other thing to do is perhaps have a bit of a ranged attack with you, so that you can cheese some spells from the distance. At least that's what I found worked best for me. At least, of course, when they're not constantly dodging. I just really wanted to play it safe. Cheesing for the win. But Arcane's a legitimate tactic, right? So the next on the series of lovely, despicable Chalice Defiled bosses is the Watchdog of the Old Lords. So first thing, I find that his first attack is usually that charge. So I find the best thing is to quickly get to his side so that he doesn't try to do that. Now, of course, this boss I fought earlier in the regular dungeon. He was a pushover. But, I mean, the main thing that makes this one so tough is that you only have half health, so he can pretty much two-shot you. So this is a strategy I heard about from Democracy and a few other YouTubers, and it's basically you want to use a long weapon and then bait attacks from the head. And then if he ever does like a sort of fire attack, then I would just spam some arcane in there. The tough part I find is that I never really can tell how many attacks he's going to do, because sometimes he seems to just do one swipe, and then other times he quickly follows it up with a second swipe. So if he does that second swipe and you're not expecting it, you might get got by it, and again it could one-shot you if you don't have full health. You see, like right there, I wasn't anticipating that, but I got lucky with the dodge. I also changed into armor that had higher fire resistance. That definitely came in handy. But if you can keep the strategy up and not get hit, like that would have killed me right there, then you should be good. It's really an endurance test, and a test of dodging the hitboxes. So I may as well use the rest of this time to talk about the Brain of Mensis. So what you need to do is there's a secret pathway in an elevator that opens up after you've defeated Micolash. It's an elevator that would lead you back down the tower. You'll see that it's a cage where the door is not closed, it's open. So when you take this, there's a bit of a secret pathway you can very carefully roll to. And if you do that, you just follow the path. There's a lot of the very, very terrifying winter lanterns along the way, so I'd bring high frenzy resistance. You continue along this path, and then you fight a few spiders with human heads. They're really creepy. And then you get to this lever, and when you pull this lever, you'll get a cutscene of this brain dropping down into a bottomless pit. You can then keep following the path, and you can get down to that area where the brain was, and that's where you get the one and only blood rock in the main game that allows you to upgrade a weapon to +10. But you can't get to the brain yet, so what do? You're going to need to go back along the path of the tower, sort of the way you would have normally progressed through to get to Micolash. And you're going to be in that area where there's all like the Oompa Loompa type servants for Mergo, little weird sort of armor type guys. And in the area with a bunch of bottomless chasms, you'll see an elevator. You ride that elevator down, and that will get you to the brain. You can kill it for the ritual material, and if you do the make contact gesture in front of it, until you properly move your arms, then you get another rune. So the last boss on our difficultiness of craziness is the Defiled Amygdala. So the best way I found to handle this amygdala is to bait attacks, and then attack the arms or the head. However, of course, this is no easy feat, as his attacks will probably do at least half your health. But that's the trick. His arms are weak, his head's even weaker. So I liked using a long weapon. I also like when he spams that poison attack because it gives you a chance to get the arms. Basically, I recommend keeping your distance. You do not want to get in close to this guy unless it's just after an attack. You have to be pretty perfect with that dodging. And if he does a jump attack, then, God help you. Because almost every time he did a jump attack, it killed me. There was actually one fight where I got him down to probably about one hit away. He did a jump attack, and I couldn't iframe through it, and that killed me. But I found that a long weapon is, again, very good for this. A similar strategy to the Watchdog. You want a long weapon to get that extra reach, so you don't have to get it in as close. So I wouldn't recommend the Blades of Mercy. It's probably not the best idea. Now, there were strategies I saw about using arcane weapons, because again, you can just target his weak point and hit him in the head. But what I found my problem was with doing that was that I would just run out of blood vials and bullets too soon. So what I tried to do in this eventual winning strategy is keep it all combat and melee related for the first half, and then as soon as you went into the final phase, then I would pull out all of the arcane, specifically the Executioner's gloves, since they're homing. This second phase is a little difficult enough as it is when he adds a little extra like black hole effect to his arm attack, but the hardest part is, of course, once he pulls off his two back arms. So again, the important thing right there is to try and get enough damage so you can get that critical in, but as long as you keep your distance. The laser attack's not too hard to dodge, and I find it's a good chance to get in close to the arms, which is nice. It's just mainly his big arm swipes with the black hole effect. That's really what gets you. This is going to be a fight of perseverance. It's really no other way to put it. Like you're going to die a lot. It's going to be very painful, and there's not much you can do but just fight for your life and put up with it. But you'll see here that once I do actually pull out the arcane weapons, that it's really where I'm able to get him down. Again, getting a critical in here is very important. I think I only got like one critical or so in here, but anytime you can, that's important. And I believe Amygdala is weak to all elements, so whether you want to use fire paper, bolt paper, or buff your weapon with arcane, either way will help because he has very weak elemental damage. So here I think I get a parry here. Yeah. So this was also very lucky of me because I was able to get a parry on him when he was right at the end of going into his final stage. And then from here I just spam the Executioner's Gloves and it's all over. So a very difficult fight, but very worth it. So that will finally get you the chalice you need for fighting Queen Yharnam. But there is one more optional chalice that I will show before we get to that. So the last chalice before we get to the last one is the Isis chalice. I'm not sure how you say it. The first boss is just another brain sucker. Nothing too special, but don't let them take your insight. And then after that, there's a bit of a more unique boss. This is the Celestial Emissary, but it's just the giant one. So I decided to show this fight in full because I felt it was unique enough in that way. Also, he has a few different attacks that I'm not sure the regular one will eventually do, because I didn't let him stick around long enough to figure this out. But basically, you'll see in a bit, I didn't notice it at first, but he grows the little tentacles on his head, and then he starts doing ranged attacks. I think I wasn't really taking him too seriously. I mean, why would you? He is just the Celestial Emissary. But the thing I wasn't expecting was for him to start shooting lasers at me. It's kind of like a Call Beyond, but he only does one of them, and it doesn't have nearly as high damage output. He's not an arcane main like Micolash or that one real boss of Bergenworth, the tower guarding lady, whatever her name is. But without all of his little goobers to go out and fight him, he's not really too difficult of a fight. Again, I was probably once again over leveled for this. Basically I spent a lot of time trying to get through the dungeons initially. I got stuck at the Abhorrent Beast. Then I got stuck at the Defiled Chalice, so I just ran through the main game like once or twice extra, and then tried it, and then it was a lot easier then. And then the last boss of the chalice here is Ebrietas again, and I'm not really going to bother showing that fight in full because you saw it already, and she is the exact same. You just gotta really watch out for the Call Beyond by sprinting. And with that, you will have conquered the last chalice before we get to the one we've all been waiting for. So, we finally made it to the Great Pthumerian Elder Chalice. I don't really care about the pronunciation at this point. So, this is quite a difficult dungeon. These bosses are not pushovers, even if you may have fought them similarly before. So, this first one we have is another Pthumerian Descendant. I'm going to show this fight in full this time. I find he's just really difficult here because of how much damage he can output. And he's got a very fast attack. It just seems to me that once it gets locked into his attack, he'll just keep on spamming it. So I decided to just go for using all of the arcane right away, although I didn't realize how quickly I'd run out of bullets. I think another kind of annoying thing is that sometimes he'll throw his little scythe sickle like a boomerang, and I don't know what it was, but I just could never seem to dodge it. Like, and of course you can get hit twice by it, the first time when he throws it, and the second time when it comes back to him. So, I don't know, I'm sure there's a way, but I haven't really figured it out yet. Also, this arena can be tricky, because like his attack can go through the environment. So, I find that you sort of get caught in the trap of like thinking you're safe, but then he throws it, and then you can get caught on the way back. Especially when he goes into this dual-handed mode, he runs fast. He just won't stop flailing. I know it is possible to parry him, but I know like I got like 1 or 2 good parries at the beginning, and then I just couldn't seem to do it for the rest of the fight. And then when he keeps moving, it just makes it very difficult to actually properly land a hit. Usually I'd find myself swinging at nothing. So, not an easy fight, but I don't really think it's unfair in any way. Although, okay, maybe him throwing the boomerang through objects is a little annoying. But, it definitely presents a challenge. It, again, makes you keep up the very fast sword and gunplay that Bloodborne is great for. I wouldn't really recommend attempting this Chalice at a lower level, but then again, if you've been able to make it this far through all of these, then I think you'd somehow be of a semi-high level at this point. Other than that, not too much to say. Let's just finish this guy off so we can get on to that well-deserved platinum trophy. Any day now. You can see even when this guy's almost dead, he still puts up a fight. Definitely can't get greedy. So, for this next boss fight, you're actually going to see me do something a little more different than usual. I'm going to be using the Beast Claw set, because this is the headless version of the Bloodletting Beast. So, I did show you the Bloodletting Beast fight earlier, but this one is a lot more difficult. So this attack here that he does, it's like some kind of earthquake ground slam, and it's got a very large hitbox. Like, it'll still damage you even if you're behind him, and I think that's because it's like a ground shake or something, but even still it does stupid amounts of damage. So, I find the best thing to do with that is to iframe through it, and then you should be pretty safe. But again, you can't always really do that. I don't know what it was, if that he's like larger than his head counterpart. But it just seems to me that I couldn't fight this boss while locked on, because I would just be stuck in a cycle of looking straight up. And I don't know how exactly. I don't know if he's really changed that much, but that was just the way it was. I found that I had to do something different. So I went with the Beast Claws, because I've been using them a lot just to farm echoes throughout the regular main game. And I like how you sort of build up the damage over time if you keep using it. It automatically has that Beast Blood Pellet effect on. But I also wanted something that was like really fast, so I could just basically keep hugging his left leg. That's really a trick. Just stick to that leg. Then he'll mainly try to use the ground pound attack, and if you can get the timing for the iframe right, then it allows you to just relentlessly keep beating on him. I find if you try to use ranged attacks, he'll just start spamming with these toxic worms that he fires from his back or something like that, and they can really mess you up, especially since it's toxic. It kills you really fast. But the trick is just stick that leg, lay on him as much as possible, and make sure you iframe through that ground pound attack. The problem I found, and you'll see there of course, is that it has a very long wind up, and so for me, I'm very like paranoid about it, and so I end up going to it too early, dodging on the windup, or sometimes in that case I just sit around and let him do it to me. I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, since I didn't really give a good look at his face, but eventually he sprouts like a snake, I think, like some kind of worm, something like that, from his head. And that's when you really want to watch out, because this snake will do like a sort of giant forward strike on you, and it goes like across almost the entire arena, because this is a lot smaller than where you first fought him. You see right there, I was completely behind him, was nowhere near the attack, but it still took like a good quarter of my health. So that's why staying fast and aggressive is important. And that's why I really couldn't do this fight while locked on. It's definitely an endurance fight. This took me, I think, like at least 6 minutes to do, which is quite a while for a boss. All of my vials, pretty much all my bullets, I think, when I actually did using them, I did a similar strategy to what I used for the Amygdala, and that is I waited till the very end when he was weak to break out the arcane spells and start spamming him. I really got to love the Executioner gloves over the course of the game, since it's like a 3-shot and it homes in. It's really, really helpful. So yeah, arcane's definitely the way to go. It's like stupidly overpowered. And thankfully I still had iframes when I was dodging that, whatever that is. Like, it looks like it's got a worm head, but it's kind of snake-like, and there are regular snake heads sprouting from things earlier, like in the Forbidden Woods. I don't know, I just know that it's very difficult, that's all. So, you're gonna have to kill it. But, yeah, in a way I find that this guy's the real defender of the Platinum Trophy, because Queen Yharnam is definitely not as difficult as some of the stuff you have to fight to get to her. She's unique, but not as crazy difficult. I beat her on my first try, whereas this was probably like my, I don't know how many tries, but it's very rare that a boss forces me to like quit out, go back to the hub world, and then rethink my strategy of approach and tactics and all that. This is a bit sort of scary for me here, because I didn't realize I was out of health vials, so I thought, oh, I'll just run in, and then I remembered that I didn't, so I was quickly trying to get my Executioner gloves out. He still didn't manage to land an extra hit on me at the end, so I don't know, but if I had died from that, I probably would have been really, really pissed off. But that's okay, because now we are all ready to finally defeat Yharnam, the Pthumerian Queen. So, for this fight, I decided just to use a variety of tactics and equipment that I'd built up over the game, just for fun, to not just stick to like one gun and one weapon, mainly because it was like, hey, this is the last one for me, because I'd already beaten the game multiple times at this point. So you'll recognize Yharnam, because we saw her at Mergo when we defeated the Wet Nurse. So what makes this fight tough is the freeze cry mechanic. So basically, when you get close to the queen, you'll hear a baby crying. You obviously can't hear it right now, but it's very important to have good sound for when you fight her, because after like the second or third cry, if you're close to the queen, you'll automatically get frozen. Kind of the same thing that if you had gotten frozen by a brain sucker. So then you're really vulnerable to attacks by the queen. So basically what you have to do is go in, get a few hits, and then quickly back out. And then what I do like about this fight, despite the annoyance of that freeze mechanic, is that she has a lot of different attacks and a lot of variety. So you see this first phase, she had a lot of like blood-related attacks. The second phase, I think she starts like duplicating herself and starts actually more doing some physical attacks. Oh right, she's got like that blood arrow attack sort of charge. Again, it's not like the attacks are too crazy difficult to deal with. I think if you've handled the other bosses at this point, you'll be able to handle her. I decided to use the machine gun just for shits and giggles. But yeah, it's the main thing is managing it. The good thing also about her clones is that they die in one hit. So I remember I saw a strategy from someone where just they had like really good gunplay, and they would quickly just shoot each one once, and then if it was a fake, it would die right away, and if it was the real, they knew which one it was. They quickly killed the fakes. Perhaps I may have gotten a little overconfident in this. Maybe I might have done not as difficult of a time if I just stuck to what I normally do, but where's the fun now? We gotta switch it up a little bit. We have all these awesome weapons at our disposal. Why not make use of them? And then once you get to this stage, there isn't too much different to the fight, I'd say. I think she just gets a little more relentless with the attacks. But again, the main thing you're going to want to watch out for is the time freeze mechanic, because if you do get caught by it, she has a perfect chance for an open hit on you, and then you're going to probably lose a lot of health from that. So again, I did a quick shot and then I found out she was the one. I don't know if she's parryable. I tried it a few times, but I don't know. You don't have to parry every boss to win. But again, just do a quick shot at the queens when you see them, and if it's a clone, it'll die right away. And if not, well, then go attack it. This is definitely quite a slog of a trophy to get to, but ultimately I think it is rewarding because you do get to see some unique bosses and interesting designs. It's just, I wish that maybe they'd been incorporated into the game somehow in not this complete separate way. Like this whole optional areas where all of the designs and elements, they're just done completely from reused things. Right? Like Bloodborne is a game with really, really great level design and environments. I like that they brought back the interconnected world that they had in Dark Souls 1. I wasn't really a fan of how Dark Souls 2, everything was a little too disjointed. It's nice to create this dreamlike environment where, things logically don't make sense. But at the same time, it is nice to sort of see everything come together in a way. And so, that's a big failing of the Chalice dungeons, is that either they're randomized or they are made up of areas where it's just sort of put together in a way. There's no real uniqueness to it. And that was the thing I really liked about it. So it's a little sad that was missing from the Chalice dungeons, but hey, we got some cool bosses out of it, and some really difficult challenges to sort of prove your worth. So make of it as you will. If the idea of these areas is not really your thing, then that's fine. You can stay away from it. But that's up to your call. I'm glad I did it. And with that, we will finally have gotten the last trophy you'll probably get. And we will be ready to get to the endings of the game. So now we are finally ready to finish this game. So, the first thing you'll need to do for any of the 3 endings is go through the gate that's been previously locked and meet Gehrman at the foot of the great tree. So, there are 3 different endings depending on the actions you choose and what you've done over the course of the game. So for this first ending, Gehrman will offer you mercy to free you from this dream, so you can wake up in the real world finally, believing whatever you want. And for this ending, you will need to accept his offer. Narratively, it's nice that you do get a choice here, but it's probably the least interesting of the endings because, you don't get a nice epic final boss fight. But still, it's nice that you have the option to make a choice in the game. So here, Gehrman will rise up and execute you, thus freeing you from the dream. And wonder what really transpired, how much of this was reality. It's unsure. I also have got to love how ridiculous the cage looks, but I don't know. I like how impractical it is, so that's why I decided to wear it on my character, because it just looked sort of goofy, but still kind of cool and unique. And here we awaken in the real world, having survived the nightmare and the whole ordeal the night of the hunt. So, I don't think I'll ever voluntarily pick this ending. I want the one where I get to fight all the bosses, which of course I'll show you how to do that. But still, very atmospheric indeed. And one interesting thing I've heard, I haven't confirmed this yet, but the next sequence you'll see the doll standing over a grave. And I think that you can see these graves in New Game Plus if you did choose that ending, sort of showing the remains, sort of lasting presence of your character from the previous playthrough. So, in a way, with this ending, the cycle will still continue with a new hunter. Just not your character who is escaped and run away from all of the insanity. And that is ending number 1. But that's no fun, so let's try that again. For the second ending, you will refuse Gehrman's offer. You will not accept being free because you want the truth. You want the answers that he has denied you. But of course, this means that now you'll have to fight him in probably one of my favorite cutscenes in the game. It just always seems to be a thing that, the old wise mentor will be like wheelchair bound or with a cane or something, but as soon as the time calls to fight, they can rise up and move around perfectly normal. But that's okay, because usually those characters are really cool and awesome. Because tonight, Gehrman joins the hunt. You can't hear him, but yes, thank you, that's what I just said. So, now we fight Gehrman. And it's always nice to start off a boss fight with a successful parry. So, Gehrman is one of my favorite fights in the game, but I don't know if he's my absolute favorite. He can be challenging if you don't know what you're doing, or if you just have not really gotten good with fighting hunter NPCs. I felt that throughout the course of the game I had. So, his difficulty will depend on that. Can you sort of get his timing down, get his strategy figured out? Despite the fact that, I do struggle a little bit overall, I didn't feel it was too difficult of an accomplishment. But I will say Gehrman is a much better final boss in many aspects than bosses from Dark Souls 1 and 2, like Gwyn or Nashandra or Aldia. And I guess that's because in most cases, the final boss isn't necessarily the ultimate test of your skill. It's more of a story-related point. Gwyn can be easily defeated if you can parry, and the Chandra is more of a pushover because it's lore-related. Side note, make sure you stay away from the giant obvious AoE and don't try to get a few extra hits in. But with Gehrman, I feel that he is a challenge to show what you've proven throughout the story, so I think that's really awesome. If I would have done anything differently, maybe I would have had it that Gehrman is much more of a mentor figure to you. Throughout the first half of the game, he's telling you what to do, where to go, helping you out. And then he sort of just disappears after Vicar Amelia, and you only see him sleeping. I guess it could have been nice if you had a bit more of a connection with him, making this fight a little more emotional, that you have to fight your mentor, who you felt has been a total bro to you the whole time. But then again, From Software definitely has a more unique way of storytelling in video games, and perhaps that would have been a little too cliche for them. So, in any case, Gehrman's an amazing fight, and it's always fun to finish off a boss with a parry. So now we've done it, we've defeated our master, but we learn that Gehrman is not the true master of this reality. It is the Moon Presence, another great one. After defeating Gehrman, the Moon Presence comes down, seeing that its slave is defeated, and now that it recognizes us, it wants us to be the new slave, the new host of the dream, and so it consumes us. That's some lovely imagery right there. So this is kind of like a more Twilight Zone type ending. We've gone through, but now end up in a similar position to the one before us. We're going to be the new owner and host of the dream, and probably acquire new hunters, which of course is what Gehrman's been doing this whole time. And that is ending number 2. But that's no fun, so let's go back and do that again. So, for the third, the best in my opinion, and secret ending, what you will need to do is collect and consume at least 3 1/3 of umbilical cords. There are 4 of them in the game. You don't need to consume them right before doing the ending, you can do them at any time. I waited so that I could show you all the endings. So one of them you will get naturally after defeating Mergo's wet nurse. One of them you can find in the abandoned workshop, which is down near the bottom of the drop from the healing workshop in the Great Cathedral. One you get by keeping the blood prostitute Ariana alive until her baby is born, and then you have to kill the baby. And the 4th one you get from killing Yusefka in her clinic, but only after you defeated Rom. If you try to go in there before, you won't get it. So make sure you get the timing very carefully on that one. Oh, this will start off a little similar to last time, but things are going to go a little differently. The Moon Presence once again descends to consume what it thinks is a worthy slave and host to the dream. But this time, we've acquired so much insight from the umbilical cords that we are strong. We can overpower the Moon Presence. And so now we're going to fight it, to prove that we will no longer be a slave to this Great One's true goals or purpose. So yeah, awesome stuff. So now we begin the final secret boss. So if you know what you're doing and you didn't have too much of trouble with Gehrman, you should be well equipped to fight the Moon Presence. You could always cheese it and just, bold Hunter's Mark out of the area to get all your blood vials and health back. But where's the fun in that? So the tricky thing about this is that the Moon Presence has this attack here where he takes away all of your health except for one. So what you'll need to do is charge in and use that attack to regain some of your health from attacking him. Because he has another attack, which is this one, which makes it so you can't heal. You'll see I'm sort of trying to spam the heal button, and it's not working. And it was really annoying because then he went and did his all but 1 HP attack. But his attacks have sort of a large wind-up after them, so it should be easily negatable. My issue is I was running out of health, but he's not too strong. As you can see, I'm really wrecking him. I believe the idea is that this Great One, they can't really communicate with each other, and they're hostile to each other but sympathetic to those. So this Moon Presence wants to defeat other Great Ones, hence the nature of the hunt. But with one final epic swing, we will have defeated the Moon Presence, and you'll have beaten the final ending of Bloodborne. You also get a huge amount of echoes for it. And so now, in the final ending, we have turned into a little squid baby thing. See, now we have ascended to become a Great One, lifting humanity into the next age. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching all of the video if you made it this way through. Hope you enjoyed my commentary and my footage. And yeah, can't believe I finally managed to make this video. It's been a while. But, the Dark Souls 2 video got some good feedback. I figured it was best to continue this on. Once again, shout out to all the other awesome YouTubers whose contents helped me figure this out. Maybe I'll do Dark Souls 3. Maybe I won't. I guess I'll just sort of have to see how that goes. But in any case, thanks for watching, and have a good night.